Good evening. Are we echoing? All right, good evening. I'd like to call the council meeting of March 7th to order. If our clerk can take attendance.
Councilmember Hudis?
Here.
Councilmember Moore?
Here.
Councilmember Any?
Here.
Vice Mayor Badami?
Here.
Mayor Risto?
Here. Okay, it looks like we're getting the echo under control. Thank you. Okay, before we start, we'll roll our video for our rules of decorum and civility.
The public is welcome to participate at town council meetings, understanding that the purpose of the meetings is to conduct the important business of the town in an efficient and effective manner. At each meeting, the following expectations of civil conduct shall apply. 1. For the benefit of the entire community, the town of Los Gatos asks that all speakers follow the town's meeting guidelines by treating everyone with respect and dignity. This is done by following meeting guidelines set forth in state law, in the town code, and on the cover sheet of the council agenda. 2. The town embraces diversity and strongly condemns hate speech and offensive hateful language or racial intolerance of any kind at council meetings. 3. Town council and staff are well aware of the public's right to disagree with their professional opinion on various town issues. However, antisocial behavior, slander, hatred, and bigotry statements are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form at town council meetings. 4. All public comments at the town council meeting must pertain to items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the town and shall not contain slanderous statements, hatred, and bigotry against non-public officials. 5. The town will go through the following steps if a disturbance results from a member of the public not following these rules. If participating remotely, town staff may mute the individual with an explanation for the record of why muting occurred consistent with this policy. If participating in person, the mayor may call a recess for violation of this policy, resulting in the immediate cessation of the audio and video recording and the council exiting the chamber. Staff will determine if the individual should be removed or if all members of the public should leave, depending on the extent of the disturbance. In the event that all public members exit, only the press would be allowed back in the meeting. Once the individual or individuals leave, the council would return to the chamber and the mayor would resume the meeting. Persons disrupting a council meeting may be cited for violation of the California Penal Code Section 403. These expectations of conduct also apply to meetings of all town boards, committees, and commissions.
Okay, thank you. With our rules of decorum understood, the next step is to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So I would like to invite our pledge leaders to come on up here. You can come all the way around. Okay, let's see. I think we should move some chairs so they can all be seen. All right, so with us this evening, we have some Stratford School Student Council members. I've got Sarah. Go ahead and wave to everybody so they know who you are. Sarah, and Euron, and Uni, and Leon. And these are leaders at Stratford School, and I imagine present leaders for the town of Los Gatos or the area. And we're really pleased to have you with us today. And I'm going to ask one of you to take the microphone, and then together you can lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. And do you know, and you'll hold it really close. And do you know where the flag is? Okay. First ask everyone to
Please stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh my gosh. That was fantastic. Okay, now my favorite part, I get to get a picture with you. Okay, thank you so much. So you get to shake hands with each of the council members. So you can shake hands with Council Member Moore, Vice Mayor Badami, and then come this way. And then you get to shake hands with Council Member Rennie and Council Member Hudes. And then come back here for a second so I can give you a thank you memento. So here you go, a reusable cup filled with candy. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mary. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is a perfect way to kick off the meeting. You did a great job. All right. Okay. All right. As usual, my favorite part of the meeting, best way to start off. Okay, so next we will take a report. Oh, let's see. I'm sorry.
I see closed session report next.
Yeah, closed session report. Thank you.
So I'll report that the town council met in closed session to discuss the Shannon Road litigation and a letter that was received from the ACLU, and there's no reportable action at this time.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to council and manager matters, and this is where council members report out on their activities that or meetings that they've engaged in since our last regular council meeting that would be of interest to the public or informative to the other council members. So I will start with Council Member Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. Since our last council meeting, I had 2 meetings with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, one with the Risk Oversight Committee and one with our Executive Committee. I also had 2 meetings as an alternate to the VTA board representing the 5 West Valley cities. They were on 3/2 the VTA board meeting, then on the next day on 3/3 we had a board workshop. The thing of most interest from VTA was, as everybody's probably aware, during the pandemic, ridership plummeted to low levels all across the country. VTA's made a lot of efforts to recover ridership, and we're actually ranked number 2 in the country for recovery of ridership. So good accomplishment by VTA.
Wow, did not know that. That's great. Thank you. Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. On the 23rd, I believe, get my calendar lined up here. The 22nd, I met with the Senior Services Committee on the roadmap. And then that was on the 22nd. And on the 23rd, I participated in the diversity, equity, and inclusion training that was here in the council chamber that involved all of our council members and a number of members of our commissions. Then the following week, I participated in the Senior Services Committee on the 27th. And then on the 28th, I participated in the Council Policy Committee, where we considered some policies regarding code of conduct primarily, and looked at our work plan for the year. And then I also attended as an observer the Community Health and Senior Services Commission meeting. And then on March 1st, I attended a very interesting meeting of the Santa Clara County Emergency Operational Area Council, which looks at preparation for all sorts of emergencies. And we had some detailed reports on what was happening with the water outlook going forward, as well as the response to the storms, including some things that didn't go so well and some ideas about how to resolve them. Those are some things that will eventually come to Los Gatos as some ideas for us to implement. Then, let's see, I attended on the 2nd a housing meeting. It was the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority. It was a public workshop to look at funding methods for housing that are somewhat in the early stage, but some ideas about ways to have funding. Most of the communities were large communities with large numbers of housing to address, but it was interesting to discuss our situation and how we might learn and opportunities that might be available for us in terms of development of affordable housing. I attended a meeting called Planning for Life Sciences Development in the Bay Area Communities, and this was to inform us about how life sciences, medical device, med tech, et cetera, could be more a part of some of the smaller communities in the Bay Area, that this offers jobs and but it also carries some responsibilities on the regulatory side. And then the last thing was a lovely event on the 4th, the Los Gatos Monteserino Police Foundation event, and I got to hang out with a number of our police officers as well as supporters in the community and folks who are working on some innovative ideas that the Police Foundation funds for possible future ways of improving our public safety in town. And that was the first time they held that in 3 years, and it was a fantastic event. That's it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Badami?
Thank you. On February 23rd, I also participated in the DEI training for council, commissioners, and committee members. I also listened in on the Council Policy Committee meeting. On February 27th, I attended the Democracy Tent as a guest speaker. I shared my goals and strategies as vice mayor, discussed town finances, and I listened to the concerns of attendees. I also corresponded with several constituents regarding town matters.
Thank you. And Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I first want to recognize that March is Women's History Month, and so this is a meaningful time for all of us to recognize the important women in all of our lives, and remember that less than 100 years ago, women in our country could not vote. Today, women face different and still very present barriers, and so I think it's really important for all of us to remember that Women's History Month is not only about celebrating the impact of women throughout history, but also about lifting up and empowering women who are working hard to improve our communities today. I want to mention that I've been sending out a monthly newsletter, which tries to distill some of the what's going on here. And so if you want to be added to that, you can email me at rmoore@losgatosca.gov. One thing I'll mention is that I'm doing community coffees at different coffee shops. The first one is on Thursday, and there are, it's from 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m., and I think I still have 1 or 2 slots left. So if you shoot me an email, we can grab some coffee. If you shoot me an email, we can also grab coffee outside of that. On Sunday, I met with a Girl Scout troop here at the town chambers. This is about 24th graders who could not have been more engaged, curious, and passionate about government, which kind of blew my mind because that's not the response I get from everyone when I talk about government. And the thing that really impressed me about them was how much they wanted to learn and how much they wanted to help their neighbors. And at the end of the talk, one of the girls, totally outside of anything I really said, raise your hands if you want to help our hungry and homeless neighbors. And every single Girl Scout raised their hand. And I thought that was really heartening. I also met with many community members and leaders over the past few weeks. A few of the kind of highlights is today, actually, I met with Santa Clara County Fire Chief Suwana Kirkow and discussed fire service in Los Gatos, mutual aid, and also how town residents can best prepare for fire and other emergencies. So that was a really productive meeting. I attended a Veterans Memorial and Support Foundation board meeting, which was really informative. And I met with Mark Turner, who's the mayor of Morgan Hill, and discussed the ways that Los Gatos can better engage regionally with our South County neighbors. Lastly, on behalf of the town, I attended a policy committee meeting with Councilmember Hudis, and also, along with all of my council colleagues here, attended a very well-organized and facilitated DEI training that highlighted the need to continue conversations about DEI and how much learning I think all of us still have to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, in addition to some of the other events that our council members attended where I was, on the 22nd, the town manager and I attended the monthly West Valley Mayors and Managers lunch meeting, and it's a great opportunity to get together. It's the mayors and managers from Campbell, Saratoga, Monte Sereno, and Cupertino and Los Gatos to discuss areas of common interest, and our topic was basically homeless and services and seeing how different communities are dealing with things and what kind of resources we need pretty much from the county, but how we're coming together. And a common theme was faith-based organizations have really been key in these efforts. On the 3rd, I attended the Santa Clara County Mayor's meeting, the first one with San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan. He called all of the mayors from Santa Clara County together. Of interest, all but 3 of us there were women, so speaking of Women's History Month. But it was there to talk about areas of collaboration and advocacy, and with the idea that putting our voices together, we can advocate for legislature that is really important for our areas. And then on this past Monday, the manager and I attended a luncheon at Stanford. It was a mayors and managers luncheon to hear what Stanford is doing, and particularly about their new College of Sustainability and areas where we can collaborate or receive support in that area. I also attended the Bay Area Housing Financial Workshop, and I think Councilmember Hudis and I were in different breakout groups, but of particular interest and a topic that came up in our group was, if you're talking about housing, affordable housing, we don't get to do either or. Our RENA numbers are kind of across the board in terms of depth of affordability and the numbers, but it was a discussion of, in different communities, what makes more sense. Would you want a broad swath of affordable housing, or would you want to go deep on very, very affordable? And so it was interesting to see in different communities which made more sense for the demographics and the workers there. I also attended the DEI training. We had all 5 council members there, and we had a good representation from our commissioners. So given that it was a Thursday night, given the council members are accustomed to giving up pretty much any and every night of the week to attend meetings, and understanding that our commissioners maybe belong to a commission that meets in the morning because they have obligations at night, etc., we probably had maybe a third of our commissioners there, and so our town manager may talk about it more, but there will be outreach to each individual commission to bring that information to them. And our facilitator, Monisha Sims, was amazing. So if you were there, you realize what a great communicator she is and how we can understand this process better. I attended the Senior Services Committee and the Community Health and Senior Services Commission met. I was there and they were basically preparing for tonight's meeting. So it was good to have that discussion. I had a meeting with a representative from Harmony Park and Grosvenor, and there were representatives from Eden Housing. And I think that'll be rolling out to the community, but they're starting to meet with council members with possibilities or what their plan is for phase 2 of the North 40. So that should be coming out to the community fairly soon. Let's see, I also attended the Police Foundation Officers Ball, and, you know, the fundraising there goes toward new ideas, new technology, things that the foundation can fund that we wouldn't necessarily be able to put in our budget, but things can be tested out. So that foundation piloted chest cameras years ago, and they also brought the funding together for our therapy dogs. So the highlight of my evening, besides being with some of the officers in tuxedos, was I got to have Gary, the therapy dog, hang out and photo with me. So I may have a new profile picture pretty soon. He's a great date. No insult to my husband, but Gary was awesome. And then, and so I did have, gosh, I think I had counted 17 meetings with different members of the community in the past 2 weeks, covering topics of the unhoused, fire preparation, trees, safety, the housing and the housing element, community gardens, DEI, any specific issues. So, you know, if you want to plug in with me and discuss any topics, I'm always available. You can reach me by my town email. And finally, possibly a highlight of my week was I was interviewed by Mayo Parfit and Charlie Wu, who are members of KCAT's producers program. There's something called Seniors Moments, and they interview different people in the community, and they were so excited to interview the mayor. But I have to tell you that I wanted to interview them because they are just so engaged, so interesting that it became a mutual conversation, and we didn't cover everything, so I think I'll be back. And that's it. Manager?
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Couple of highlights for your consideration. On Thursday, March 16th, our Housing Element Advisory Board will be meeting to review the revised draft of the housing element that continues to address some of the comments from HCD. In addition, our library programs are really fantastic. There's 2 coming up that I want to highlight. Tomorrow at 5, we're talking about climate change with an equity lens. And then on March 20th, we're going to talk again about climate change and the impact of factory farming, animal factory farming on climate change. So those are coming up. And then as the mayor mentioned, myself and another staff member are now going to virtually all of our boards and commissions to talk about the draft DEI plan and some of the initial recommendations and trying to solicit input from our commissions as well as the public who will be attending those meetings. So we look forward to that input. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the ongoing work. Next on the agenda, we have our consent items. And so these items, as we mention each week for people who are watching, these are all regular items before the council, but they're considered routine or non-controversial and can be passed by just a straight vote of the council. That said, any member of the public is welcome to speak to us on any or all items on the consent calendar. You get 3 minutes. I don't have any cards. I'm looking on Zoom for a second to see if anyone has their hand raised, and I don't see that. Are there any members of the council who would like to pull a consent item? Okay, seeing no hands, do I have a motion? Vice Mayor Badami.
I'll make a motion to approve consent items 1 through 6.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I see no hands. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed. The motion passes 5-0. That moves us on to our public hearings. And before we go there, we have verbal communications. And verbal communications is a time when any member of our public can speak to the council on any matter that is not on the agenda, but is under the purview of the work of the council. I'm looking on Zoom. I don't see any hands right now. And I've got some cards. Hold on, let me see. I actually do see a hand raised on Zoom. So I'll go with Zoom first, and then I have some people in the room. So Ali Miano, you may speak.
Thank you so much. So although I'm a complete streets and transportation commissioner, I speak this evening as a member of the Los Gatos Anti-Racism Coalition and in my own behalf in support of my friend, colleague, and fellow Los Gaton, Kylie Clark. I've had the privilege of knowing Kylie for over a year and working with her in the coalition. Not only is she highly knowledgeable with respect to affordable housing and many other forms of support for those most vulnerable in society, but she's also herself a person of the utmost generosity and integrity. When Kylie expressed in writing her frustrations as a private citizen to the Department of Housing, she didn't know what she thought was a private communication would suddenly be making the local papers. She shared her anger that the democratic process had been thwarted with the purchase of 3,000 signatures, a feat certainly accomplished by the moneyed, largely white, and indeed perhaps largely male interests in this town. As someone who studied various aspects of linguistics for the better part of her life, I find it curious that to refer to a group of people as rich or white or men is not considered a slur, but when Kylie expressed her discontent by putting these words together to indicate the apparent outsized influence of this group in Los Gatos, she was unanimously censored by the council. Let's be clear, all human beings have bias, every one of us. And yes, we react to injustice in our midst. When we do react to injustice, our bias may emerge loud and clear. When the moneyed interests in this town bought and paid for signatures to, again, thwart the democratic process and affordable housing here, they too were demonstrating with actions far more damaging than a phrase their bias against the young, the old, the unhoused, the poor, the middle class, and anyone else who can no longer afford to live in Los Gatos. So I ask you, what is more divisive? Making a comment that you thought was private in a moment of frustration, or standing in the way of progress for the many in favor of the egos and interests of a few? Tonight, perhaps as last night, an elderly man will sleep under the awning of the church across from my house. I don't know how to help him, so I merely say a prayer for him. But you all have the power to help him. You have the power to make change in Los Gatos. This is a beautiful town, and we all love it. But there are some things that need fixing here, and certainly housing is one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the speaker? I think not. So I now have some cards in the room. I don't have any hands raised. Jeff Suzuki.
Good evening, everyone. If that word white man was replaced with black man or brown man or yellow man, if I'd written that letter, I'd be run out of town because I'd be a racist. This is what a resident of Los Gatos said to the Mercury News a few weeks ago regarding the censure of a Commissioner Clark. The funny part is that I actually agree with that statement. It would be racist to say that. Not because of political correctness, it would be racist because in the context of our history, it wasn't black, nor brown people, nor people who look like me, who obstructed housing reform. Historically, it took a lot of deliberate legislation and systemic violence for neighborhoods like those of Palo Alto, Cupertino, and Los Gatos to be as segregated as they are today. And even though racial segregation in housing is technically illegal, the lack of economic reform, especially in affordable housing, remains a primary factor that maintains modern-day segregation. It's one of the reasons why when you look across the street, almost 60 years after the passage of the Fair Housing Act, there are almost no black students attending Los Gatos High School. That was the case decades ago. That was the case when I attended, and that's still the case. We cannot ignore the fact that it was white people who kept them out then, and it is not happenstantial that white property owners keep them out now. Nobody here in this room can extricate themselves from history. Not me, not you, and certainly not the man who left that unfortunate comment for our posterity to reflect upon. And Commissioner Clark recognized that. I would not be surprised if her censure became far more divisive in the eyes of the public than the bluntness of her email. It is my belief that she will be vindicated with time. And for that reason, I stand in full solidarity with Commissioner Clark. When I served as planning commissioner in 2021, it was no secret that I brought a perspective that prioritized affordable housing and anti-racism. And during that time, I tried my best to serve impartially through the lens of our guidelines. But as a private citizen, I've made many comments where I have bluntly characterized Los Gatos' economics and culture as racist. And yet, I've never had to deal with anything close to what Commissioner Clark has had to deal with. And that's a shame. She explicitly wrote this letter as a private citizen. She hasn't violated any rules. And to the town's own admission, no material harm was done. Please reconsider your censure. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joanne Rogers.
Good evening. I never get this right. Good evening. Joanne Rogers. I've been a resident since 1973, and thank you for the opportunity to let me speak tonight. It's my understanding that earlier this evening, there was a special meeting held to discuss the letter received by the town of Los Gatos from the American Civil Liberty Union, the ACLU. That letter states that there is anticipated litigation surrounding the censure of Planning Commissioner Kylie Clark, which was imposed by the Town Council on February 15th, 2023. Because of this anticipated litigation, it seems to me that Ms. Clark should take a leave of absence from her position as Planning Commissioner until these issues have been resolved. If she decides not to take a leave of absence, then she should recuse herself of any proposals that are presented by white males. It seems to me that she cannot be objective and has shown an obvious bias, as she has stated in her letter written to the California Housing and Development Department in Sacramento in November 2022. I compliment Council Member Rob Moore, who recused himself during the censure discussion on February 15th because of his partnership with Ms. Clark. It seems to me that he should continue his recusal in the future if there are other issues that involve decisions made by Ms. Clark. Because the ACLU has asked for many additional documents from the town's records, I'm asking that the town make these documents available to other planning commissioners and the community at large so that citizens are fully informed of what has been communicated. It seems unfortunate that we've come to this position when it should have been, when it could have saved face and more work for everyone, including Ms. Kylie Clark, if she had simply resigned from her volunteer commission and not put the town through this situation. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and our last card is for Lee Fago.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm going to shift gears here and talk about something a little more positive. I want to let you know that I'm speaking strictly as a 26-year resident of the town of Los Gatos. I'm not representing any organizations, just myself. It's nice to see Los Gatos on the front page of a newspaper again, but this time in a very positive story. Though the story is incomplete, I think it's important to see that it's a positive and informative article about the new below market rate rental units in Los Gatos for the quote missing middle. I'm glad to see that the tenants are in fact local school employees so they can rent at a reasonable below market rate. That's a little discriminatory, but it's a different issue I don't want to get into at this time. As was pointed out, our educators are can now more easily be a larger part and involved in our local community. I do believe it is important to recognize, and this is important, the role of the town of Los Gatos, That is, the elected officials who voted for the support of that site on Ditto's Lane, the town staff who worked with the developer and doing a lot of work to get that process expedited, and the citizens whose tax funds paid for the land. Recognize they all contributed in different ways to this new development. The town charged only $1 for the 1.6 acre Ditto's Lane property, which costs $3 million for the town to purchase, plus tens of thousands of dollars more for demolition and improvements to the site before the sale. Then the town provided two each $600,000 interest-free loans to the developer to help with much of the construction cost. The site now has two two-bedroom rental houses and two one-bedroom ADUs for a total of 4 units on this beautiful and convenient site. It is important to recognize that the cost to build the units on this free site were significantly reduced due to local donations of materials and labor, more good collaboration, and a sense of community. It is encouraging to see that the new residents will take financial empowerment classes as well. Further, the deed grants requires this site to be only made available for below market rate housing. This too will help us continue to be more of a community working together. I just wanted to point out how the town itself was and still is such a large part of this process. Thank you, fellow residents, for all that you have done and paid for this project. It is important to recognize the town's role in this. So thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. So I don't see any other hands raised, and I don't think we have any other information that we need on that. Okay, so given that, we will move to our public hearings, item number 7, and that goes to our senior planner, Sean Mullen.
Thank you and good evening. Before you this evening is a request to modify the Shannon Valley Ranch Plan Development Overlay to allow an increase in the maximum resident size for Lot 14 and the average resident size allowed within the subdivision. The subject property is just over 8 acres located in the northern portion of the subdivision. A single-family residence once stood on the property, but was destroyed by fire in 1997 prior to the 2004 subdivision. Lot 14 is the last undeveloped residential lot in the subdivision. The Town Council's 2002 approval of the PD ordinance included Performance Standard Number 8, which limits a replacement residence on Lot 14 to a similar square footage, mass, and scale as the original residence that was destroyed by fire. Your staff report provides details on the origin of this standard. Additionally, the standard limits homes in the subdivision exclusive of Lot 14 to a maximum size of 4,850 square feet, with an average size of 4,650 square feet, and at least 2/3 of the homes being single story. Town records for Lot 14 do not provide much detail on the original residence that was destroyed. Included with your report is a letter from 2016 indicating that the original home was 1 story and approximately 2,400 square feet. Other anecdotal information indicates that the size of the residence was closer to 3,000 square feet. Given the incomplete nature of the records for Lot 14, the staff has messaged that the lot could be developed with a single-story residence with a maximum size of 3,000 square feet to be located in the general area of the previous residence and subject to architecture and site approval. After purchasing the property, the applicant contacted staff to explore its development potential. Staff provided guidance on the limitations imposed by the PD and referred the applicant to the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee to obtain preliminary feedback on a proposal to increase the allowed residence size to 6,000 square feet. As detailed in your report, the CDAC expressed some concerns with the preliminary proposal, recommending that the maximum residence size be more in line with the development in the subdivision. In response, the applicant revised their request and now seeks a maximum residence size of 4,850 square feet. This increase also requires a change to the average residence size from 4,650 square feet to 4,655 square feet. On January 25th of this year, the Planning Commission considered the request and forwarded a recommendation of approval to the Council. The Planning Commission meeting minutes are included as attachment 3 to your report. At this time, no development is proposed. A future proposal for a new residence would be subject to a discretionary review under an architecture and site application. Based on the analysis in the report, staff recommends that the council make the required findings for CEQA and the town code and introduce an ordinance by title only, amending the PD to increase the maximum allowed residence size on lot 14 and the average residence size in the subdivision. A desk item was distributed this afternoon with additional public comment received with your staff after your staff report was published. This concludes my presentation, and staff's available to answer any questions.
Thank you. I just wanted to, for one thing, I don't know if we do disclosures, but I visited the site actually when it came to the Planning Commission, and then I went back and visited that area again. I don't know if other council members have disclosures along those lines. Councilmember Hudes?
Yes, I also visited, and I do have a question after that.
Okay. Councilmember Rennie?
I have no disclosures.
Vice Mayor?
I visited the site.
Okay, great. Thank you. I did have a quick question and then I'll go to you, not to jump, but that was what came to mind. Regarding the desk item we received today, those requests seem very specific to an application, and I didn't see anything that was brought up in that letter that was relative to our decision tonight. But if I missed something, can you correct me, please?
Thank you for that question. I agree with your summary. I didn't see anything that was applicable to this request, but more appropriate for the future development of the property.
Okay, thank you. So we would hold on to that letter, and then if and when the application comes forward, that would be part of it.
That's correct.
Okay, and for the public edification, a letter was received asking questions like, where's the driveway going to be? How tall is it? Very specific questions, and there is not a proposal right now. It's just for general parameters of the property. Councilmember Hudes?
Thank you. My questions were kind of along the same line, but maybe a little more related to process. So I received it this afternoon, and as with any material that comes before the council, we must consider every item of evidence that comes before us. But I have to say that I can consider it commensurate with the amount of time that I have available to read it and study it. And so I wondered if there was any background on whether these items had been provided to the Planning Commission previously.
Thank you for that question. I can't recall the specific details, but there were discussions at the CDAC level, and I not recalling offhand any discussion about driveway placement. The Planning Commission did talk about the CDAC's guidance, which included information on the driveway and exterior lighting and visibility. So in a way it was discussed.
Okay, thank you.
If I could follow on, then any of those questions or issues would be readdressed or would be addressed again when an application comes forward?
Thank you. All this information has been provided to the property owner, and in the future, if an application comes forward from that property owner, it's all part of the project file and would be reviewed when the application comes in and we're looking at the details of the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from my fellow council members? Okay, seeing no more questions for staff right now, I will move to, do we have?
This is a public hearing, so the applicant has 5 minutes to speak.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to ask what the time is. And I've got a card here, and the applicant is on Zoom or here? Chad Sealer, are you the applicant or are you? Okay, so our applicant might be our Zoom member who goes by the name Home, which is the only hand I see up. So if we can unmute Home and see if that's our applicant. Okay, it looks like you
Hi,
can.
fellow, hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much for, my name is Derek and I represent Colleen Wu, the trustee for this site. I just want to let everyone know that The application, as per Sean has stated, is only for the increase in size to permit a potential building plan, not an actual plan that is already in order. We really appreciate the HOA for specifying specific concerns regarding future building plans. But there is no plan that is currently being, I guess, put forth at the time. And I think regarding the what the council members has discussed regarding previous plans, those were with a different property owner. So we would love to hear everybody's input and concerns, and we will put all of that into the actual processing of any future plans. And thank you very much.
Okay. You still have, so that sounds like that. Does anyone have questions for our applicant right now? Okay. Seeing none, we'll then move to public comment. And in the room, I have Chad Seiler. Thank you.
So we've gone through a lot of this. This is on paper now, so I don't intend to go through the details. But as a matter of process, then, do I work with you and Derek to address these as plans come to life, or?
I think what would be helpful is if you direct to us what concerns or what things you'd like to say now, and then we can ask staff for clarification on next steps.
Yeah, so we put forth some points that are principally a matter of safety and aesthetics. Safety being the number one issue. You mentioned the house that burned down previously. We do have questions for the development team and you at some point as to fire and safety access to the property from top to bottom. The reason the house burned previously is because the fire department could not reach the primary residence at the top of the hill. You've been there, you know what that looks like. So how is that going to be addressed? Fire hydrant locations off Santa Rosa, Mountain Laurel, et cetera, is one of our primary concerns. The driveway and trailhead access, there are 7 other concerns that we've laid out in this document that we'd like to walk through at some point when the time is right and those plans have come to life. We have 5 other questions just around property aesthetics, looks and feel, just to make sure things are in line not only with the county and the town, but with our HOA requirements. We have some reps of sorts we're seeking from the construction team themselves in terms of vehicle locations parked and so forth and times of work. And then a question around process and communication between, I guess, you, Sean, and Derek and team as the project starts coming together. So that's what we've aired.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm glad the HOA is thinking ahead. I'll have staff address the timing and the process.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for your comments. Currently, as I've stated, what's being considered by the council tonight is some changes to the development parameters, what we call performance standards. The next step in the process is this current property owner or a future property owner could submit a architecture and site application, which is a discretionary application. Many of the items in your letter from the HOA are required information of that application. That application would be considered in a public hearing, and staff would be available before that public hearing during the development review process to answer any questions that the HOA or any members of the public might have, or meet with yourself or the HOA or any members of the public. All the project details would be made public and available for review. And the public could also provide comments on the application, which would be provided to any hearing body considering the application.
Wonderful.
Great, and you can stay in touch with our staff. Thank you. I do have a question. Okay. I do have a question in terms of, I know this came to the council because it's a plan development. Next steps, will that just stay with the Planning Commission, or would that also, because it's part of the plan development, come to the council?
The next step, should the council take it through an introduction tonight and a second reading, and the ordinance becoming effective 30 days after, under the architecture and site application, it would qualify for either the Development Review Committee or the Planning Commission. The merits of the application, the details, and any requested exceptions or variances that are included in that will inform staff on which hearing body we forward it to.
Okay, thank you. So, manager?
I just wanted to say that the applicant has another 3 minutes after hearing all the other public comment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. So I don't have any other cards. I don't have any other hands except for our applicant on Zoom. And so, Derek, you have 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, and thank you, everyone, for allowing this time. We are not in the process of doing any specific construction plans at the time. However, per our process with the town of Los Gatos and the various commissioners, we understand that the opinion of the HOA as well as the city regulatory committees are very important in the planning process. So just if there is any input at this time, besides the questions that were asked, with which we will directly impose on any kind of architectural plans, we would just love to hear everybody's concerns ahead of time so that we can make this process as seamless as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I think at this hearing, we're just here to make the determination whether we want to uphold what the Planning Commission decided. So I will close the public hearing and move to discussion among the council members. Does anyone have any questions, comments, a motion? Councilmember Rennie.
I was going to make the motion. It doesn't look like it. Seems to be fairly straightforward, so I'll go ahead and I'll make the motion to introduce an ordinance of the town of Los Gatos in attachment 4, which is page 226 of our iPad, by title only, amending the Plan Development Ordinance 2172 relative to the maximum residence side allowed on Lot 14 and maximum average residence side allowed in the Shannon Valley Ranch subdivision, and repealing Ordinance 2172 for the Shannon Valley Ranch subdivision at Shannon and Hicks Road.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Badami.
I'm going to second that, but I just wanted to add a couple comments that I was vice chair of the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee when we saw this back on May 11th of 2022, and it seems the input that we provided was well taken. It seems punitive to restrict the lot size to 3,000 square feet when the average size of the residences in this development are about 4,500 square feet at a minimum. So to me, it seemed like a very reasonable motion, and I will second that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
No, and the mayor votes aye. No one opposed. The motion passes 5-0. And do we have a reading to do, or no? By title only?
You've satisfied the requirement by reading the title into the record.
Okay, great. Then we'll move to item number 8, and it looks like we have our planning manager, Jennifer Armour, to give the report.
So I'll start things off, and then I will pass the baton to Ms. Armour as needed. This is Gabrielle Whelan, town attorney, and this is a follow-up presentation regarding the town's Senate Bill 9 ordinance. And by way of background, Senate Bill 9 authorizes either 2-unit housing developments or urban lot splits where one parcel becomes 2. The town adopted an ordinance to address Senate Bill 9 applications in November. And at that time, the council asked staff to return in 3 months with follow-up information on 3 topics. And those 3 topics were regulating houses in high fire hazard severity zones, imposing affordability requirements, and owner occupancy requirements. And so I will address those topics in turn. Senate Bill 9 authorizes cities to impose mitigation measures in very high fire hazard severity zones but it goes on to state that if a city or town already has mitigation measures included in its building code or fire code, that additional mitigation measures are not authorized. And then the next topic is whether or not the town can require that Senate Bill 9 units be affordable. The town could impose an affordability requirement on Senate Bill 9 units, but that requirement would need to be uniform across all types of residential development. And so that would mean, adopting a standard so that 1 out of every 2 units were rendered affordable. And so, that option is on the table for the council to discuss. If the council went with that direction, we would want to do a study to make sure that that was economically feasible for developers in town. And then the third topic had to do with owner occupancy. Senate Bill 9 has an unusual requirement stating that owners who do Senate Bill 9 projects are to sign an affidavit stating that they intend to occupy one of the units created. And we did have public comment at the time that the ordinance was introduced, asking why the town did not require that the owner actually occupy one of those units developed under Senate Bill 9. And so staff and I have went back and looked at the legislative history of the statute. And it looks as if at one point in time, the legislature was considering imposing an owner occupancy requirement, but then they opted not to, and it was a compromise to adopt the intent to occupy language. And so that language is preemptive of city regulation. And so the town cannot adopt a standard that is stricter than is what in the state law. We're limited to what is in the state law. And then in addition, the town did research on affidavits that are used in other jurisdictions, and other jurisdictions are also using the intent to occupy language. And so staff recommends continuing with that. And I'm available for follow-up questions, and Ms. Armour, the planning manager, is also available.
Great, thank you. I'm sure we have questions. Councilmember Hudes has a look on his face like he's ready to roll, so.
Well, I wasn't sure about public comment, but just let's start on.
Well, we'll go to public comment, but if we have questions, yeah.
So just on the last point, and about the intent to occupy, one of our residents proposed using "I will occupy." What would the consequences be if our ordinance used the language "I will occupy"?
It wouldn't be enforceable because we're preempted by the state law, and so we'd be limited to pursuing someone who falsely indicated that they intended to occupy the unit. And when the state legislature discussed this topic, the remedy that they discussed for local jurisdictions was prosecuting owners for perjury. So that's the remedy the legislature had in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we open it to possible public comment? Okay, I don't have any cards, and I don't know if there's anyone in the room who wanted to speak to this topic. I'm looking on Zoom, and of our attendees, I'm not seeing a hand raised. So I'll give you a couple seconds. Anyone on Zoom wanted to speak on item 8, SB 9? Okay. So I will close the public comment and return to the council members. Actually, one of the things I want to, well, we have 3 things to discuss, and we can discuss them in any order we want. But following up on what Councilmember Hudes said, I recognize that in our community, people are concerned about, is an investor going to come in, do these lot splits? So I thought about it, knowing that we have state law and we cannot be preemptive. The other thing is it gets really problematic. How do you enforce that? If somebody's economic situation changes, if they die, if they relocate, you can't grab somebody and just tie them to the building and tell them they have to live there. The one thing that makes me a little uneasy with the 3-year is from the time you file to the time the home is built. As we know with timelines, it can be a lot longer than 3 years. So the intent to occupy is I don't even know if that's binding. I mean, you say intent to occupy and it stands for 3 years. What can we do if somebody doesn't occupy, or can we find evidence that they never intended to occupy? I mean, that sounds like that would be a hard thing to enforce.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any situations where people have been prosecuted for perjury, but it would be a matter of establishing that when the person said they intended to occupy the unit, they had no intention of occupying the unit.
Okay, and it sounds like that's the strongest we can go on that item. Council members, do you want to go through these one at a time, or do you want to work backward and start with the intent to occupy, since we've been discussing that? Councilmember Hudes?
I don't have anything further on that item.
Okay, anybody else? Councilmember Moore.
I have one general question. So our current ordinance talks about the 1,200 square feet maximum requirement. I just wanted to make, when in your research, did that come out as totally okay and lawful?
I didn't look at that issue specifically, but I'm not aware of anything that would render it unlawful.
And Councilmember, I can add that in addition, we did have a conversation with a member of the HCD talking about that, and the general sense that we got was that because a second unit could use the full remaining floor area allocated to the parcel, that we weren't prohibiting the full use of that parcel that would be allowed under a regular process.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other comments, questions on the other topics? We've got the fire hazard and the affordability models. Councilmember Rennie.
Thank you. So on the fire hazard area, what I read from this is we can't do anything because we've already adopted fire hazard mitigation measures.
That's what the statute provides. A potential workaround, which is untested, would be for the town to amend its building standards to impose additional fire safety requirements. And so that would be an amendment to a local amendment to the California Building Code. That would be a novel approach, and staff has determined that the State Department of Housing and Community Development is currently examining this very issue. And so we expect to get guidance from the state within the next 12 months. And so staff's thought is it would make sense to wait for guidance from the state before we embark on the untested program.
Okay, thank you. And, I guess I agree, waiting to see where that goes. But this is one that bothers me because, if we look at our state, we've got severe fire hazard problems. We spend a ton of money trying to fight fires. We spend a ton of money trying to protect houses. Even if a house has done all the hardening, that gives it a little better chance of surviving, but it doesn't keep the firefighters from having to defend additional houses that have been built in high fire zones. So it just, to me, it's very short-sighted to allow additional development in these high fire zones. That's just going to cost more to defend, going to cost more for our fire departments to be able to defend, cost more for them to come out and inspect. So I'm interested to keep following where this goes and bring it back to us.
I would agree with that as well. I think the last place we want to add housing is up in the hills, and that this is sort of the opposite of what good planning is. We're encouraging suburban sprawl in a way, or up in the hills, and it's not just whether the home is fire hardened. There's evacuation issues and everything else. But given that HCD will be weighing in on this, I would be in favor of keeping things the way they are right now, but monitoring it and seeing what we can do in the future. Vice Mayor Badami.
We're almost getting to a unanimous decision here because I also support just waiting until we get some further guidance from the HCD.
Okay, Councilmember Hudace.
I'm going to start some trouble here. The concern I have, and I think this was in the research, that 5 of 13 communities that we looked at actually do prohibit SB9 in the fire hazard zone. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I believe that is true.
So I respect that we need to wait for HCD, but I'm wondering if there are steps we could take to do our own work in the meantime toward that end. And I think there were some suggestions by Ms. Whalen about a way that we could potentially look at revising our building code to include some objective standards. I would not suggest implementing that until HCD, if they come out with something within a year. But from my perspective, this is not something that should drag on, because, you know, the issue is that it's only a matter of time where we have a wildfire in the hillsides in the fire hazard zone. And it would be very likely that there would be some lives lost in that incident, the way of our topography and the narrow streets that we have. And so I think it's important that we keep this on the front burner and keep working on this so that we have a solution as soon as possible, because I don't think we want to be in the position where lives were lost because we didn't act. And I also think the town might have some additional liability if there were things that we could have done and didn't do. And if there are 5 other communities that have done something to exclude, I think it's worth continuing to work on this and research it now, and looking at what possible changes could get made in the very earliest that we could do that. So I had a long conversation with Rob Stump about this. He and others would be willing to work with the town to try to collect some information about the other municipalities, as well as specific aspects of the building code that could be put into objective standards. And so I think I might be, you know, again, waiting for HCD, but with a limit of maybe a year, and being prepared we know that objective standards are allowed, and so beginning to do the research on what those might be, so we don't end up with a period of 2 years or 3 years in which there may be an incident. So that was, you know, my perspective more than a question, but I think I understood the direction that would allow us to put objective standards that could limit development. I think the bigger concern is the split lot situation than the secondary unit, because on the split lot you could also get another unit there as well. Plus, you're more likely to have a lot more cars, and those are the type of development that would go onto a split lot. Is the larger hillside development that we've been concerned about increasing density in our hillsides for some time. So I don't know it would be possible to separate the secondary unit issue from the split lot in the hillside, but I believe that's where the bigger issue is. So I don't know, you know, I guess we're just giving direction on this at this point, but I thought it would be valuable to add that perspective that we could and should continue working on this actively.
Okay, I had a follow-on question, but Director Paulson is holding his microphone.
Thank you for the question. I can't tell if this is on. Okay. So I
appreciate the comments, Councilmember Hudis. So I'll reach out to Mr. Stump and have a conversation with them. Also speak with the building official to figure out what additional measures might be able to be included, as well as with County Fire, because County Fire is the one who does the local amendments. I would say that most of the building and fire code are objective from that standpoint. They're not like some of the subjective guidelines that we have in other policies. So, but can commit to having that conversation. Mr. Stump's been helpful on other items, so we can, if they want to try to pull together that information and see if those jurisdictions adopted something above and beyond what other jurisdictions did, or they're just using that and moving forward, waiting for that guidance from the state. But we'll definitely look into that and move forward so that it doesn't get stalled, because as we've seen with many things, may be a little while before we get specific guidance from the state.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, my question is, those 5 jurisdictions that are not allowing SB 9 in the hillsides, it says they have not or in extremely high fire zones, they have not adopted fire hazard mitigation measures. Does that mean they don't allow any new housing there, regardless of whether it's SB 9?
Thank you for the question. I don't have a complete answer to that, because in most cases with those agencies, we were not able to get specific responses from staff in regards to this question and following up on those details. So it could be that could be part of our follow-up work as we're having the discussions that Director Paulson mentioned.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have is that right now, independent of SB 9, all of our properties can add an ADU and a junior ADU. Is that correct, or are there exceptions in the high fire zone areas?
No, that is correct. And in our conversations with HCD, having restrictions that apply just to the SB 9 units is a significant concern in terms of prohibiting them in the high fire area where we would allow an ADU. And so that is a source of this idea that we could consider some modifications to the building code that then would apply across the board to all housing types or something like that, so that it isn't something that's focused and applying just to those SB 9 units, because that was of a significant concern.
Okay, thank you. Because, yeah, with the ADU and the junior ADU, every property could have 3 dwelling units, and SB 9 maxed out would be 4. I mean, it's more, but it's a similar kind of concern with cars and evacuation and fire hazard and additional housing in areas where we may not want to encourage that. Thank you. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to express my agreement with the 3 council members who spoke previously about waiting. I think that while this is important to Planning Manager Armour's point, I think that we have seen HCD is not right now in the business of restricting housing very much, and so I'd be kind of surprised if they came back and said, yeah, we're going to kind of go backwards in terms of how we've been talking about SB 9 and allow for these extra restrictions. And the other thing is, I appreciate our director's willingness to jump in on this, but I know that town staff is really short-staffed right now dealing with the housing element. And so I just don't want this to take away from some more pressing things, in my opinion, when we probably won't hear from HCD for a little while. So my guidance would also be to take our time on this one.
Okay, any other council members? So it sounds like the guidance is that, obviously we're not going to be making a motion and deciding that we want to restrict SB 9 housing in the extremely high fire zones, but we do want to see what other jurisdictions are doing. Is it legal, and what measures we can take, in the future. And see, not necessarily wait until HCD gets all the way back to us, but see if there's other work we can do. Is that kind of wrap it up? Manager, you look like you want to clarify or ask a question.
Yeah, I do, because I think we are hearing a little bit of a mixed message. We're hearing do the research now, and then we also heard wait until we get further guidance from HCD. So I think in this case, it might be helpful to have a motion just so we know which direction to follow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to make a motion, Councilmember Moore?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I'll make a motion to direct staff to wait until we have further guidance on SB 9, specifically in the very high fire zones. Is that a complete motion, Manager?
Thank you. And given the workload that our staff is under right now, I will second that motion. Comments? Councilmember Hudes?
For the reasons I said, I could not possibly support that motion. I think that the clock is ticking, and I think that we are in a unique physical location. A very large percentage of our town is in the high fire hazard zone, even more than some of those other communities, such as Sunnyvale, that took that step. And I think we owe it to the people who live here to continue to work on this issue. I think it's a very important issue, and so I could not support a motion that says we won't continue to research or continue to explore with Santa Clara County Fire, or to engage on developing some ideas about how we might address this issue. I just feel it would be very irresponsible.
Councilmember Rennie?
Thank you, Mayor. So the part of the staff report that bothers me is it says HCD mentioned that this specific topic has not been resolved and will most likely be addressed in the next few years, right? Few years. So a motion that says wait for HCD, I'm also a little bit worried about. I agree we've got some more pressing things to work on right now, but this motion effectively says do nothing and ignore it, because a few years is a long time and we'll have forgotten by then anyway. So maybe we want to consider a motion that says, let's revisit this in 6 months or a year and see where we are and then decide what to do. Something like that I would prefer.
Okay, yeah, the few years is a little Vice Mayor Badami.
I'm in that camp as well. I'm very concerned about fire line areas and hillsides. I'm concerned about trees falling on people and killing them, loss of lives. So I would rather that we get a jump start and do the research now.
Okay, I will withdraw my second because it doesn't look like we're going to go anywhere there. Can we do that procedurally? Or okay, Councilmember Moore.
I was just going to modify my motion. So I think I'll modify the motion to direct staff to monitor HCD's direction on SB 9 and come back to council at an appropriate time in the next year with an update on this, the very high fire zone piece of SB
9. Vice Mayor Badami.
I'm not going to second it, but what is your direction on starting research now?
Not to do so.
Thank
you. Councilmember Rennie.
I'll second it. I think that's reasonable with all the other things we have on our plate.
Okay, I'm hesitant to just add another chunk of workload. I mean, it is important. We're actually doing quite a few things that are important all at once. And given that we have a lot of high priorities, it's difficult to pick one, but I think monitoring what HCD is doing, and if we get further information from other communities, like, there's a delayed response or what they did. I mean, it's disturbing to me that the 5 communities that are not allowing SB 9 development or high fire areas don't have fire mitigation measures. I mean, it seems like that's leaving them open to some issues. So I don't want to model that. So given that, I'll be supporting the motion. Any other comments? Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, I appreciate trying to move the motion in a direction, but I think that there are things we can do now, and I don't think there's a higher priority of anything that we're working on other than the safety of our residents, and with particular eye toward the fire hazards that are sure to come. So I will not be supporting.
Okay. Given that safety is multidimensional, and we have a lot of issues around safety, I don't think we're abandoning all of them, but Councilmember Moore?
I would tend to agree. One quick question of staff. How many, do you all know at this point how many SB 9 applications we've received to date?
Thank you for that question. I don't know the total number off the top of my head, but I believe it's in the range of about 7 urban lot splits, and I believe about 2 unit development applications.
Great, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
I also won't be supporting the motion. Public safety is a top priority for me, and public safety is also a top strategic priority for council and our town.
I agree. We have a few strategic priorities. So we have a motion and a second. It looks like we've made our comments. I will call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
No.
Okay, so the motion passes 3-2 with Vice Mayor Badami and Councilmember Hudes voting no. Thank you. We'll now move to our final item.
Did you want to talk about the affordability component?
Thank you so much. Yes, 2 out of 3. Our next part that we still haven't discussed is the affordability part of it. So, Councilmember Rennie.
I'm fine leaving what we had. We set the 1,200 square feet maximum for one of the units on a lot split to make sure that we got something that was reasonably affordable. Our town needs, when you talk about affordable, often you're meaning income restricted. But we also need, the term's been thrown around, missing middle, or units that may not be income restricted but are going to be less expensive. So I think, and the intent of the lot split was not to create income restricted affordable, but to address this missing middle term, which some people don't like, I know, but is descriptive of that housing for people that can't qualify for missing middle yet don't have very high salaries. And the way we've set this up, I think it addresses that direction and addresses the intent of the law. So I'm happy to leave it as is.
Okay, Councilmember Moore? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I just had comments. If you want to go first, please.
Okay, yeah. I agree. I mean, I think I was the one who made the motion when we were originally working with SB 9. And I feel like, if we're looking, depending on the lot that's going to shape, if the FAR is 2,400, you could have a duplex of 1,200 square feet each. You could have varying sizes. If somebody has a really, really big lot and wants to build, their FAR allows 6,000 square feet, there's still going to be a smaller unit. There won't be 3,000 square foot homes. There will for sure be something on the smaller side. So with each development, if 2 units are built in an SB 9 situation, we'll always be getting something that's 1,200 square feet or smaller, which I think is really filling in a lot of what we are missing in this community. So I actually really like it a lot still, and I think I want to stay with that. So, Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. In total agreement with both of the previous comments, I think that, just to sum up, an additional affordability requirement would actually restrict the ability to create affordable, lowercase a affordable housing. So I like the, I like it as it is.
Okay, Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to just maybe put my perspective on the intent of SB 9. I did research the origins of SB 9, and Tony Atkins, who was behind this from the very beginning, has always used the word affordable. Yet, as it made it through the process, the law never prescribed how to achieve affordable. And so I think we should be continually looking for ways for the SB9 units to be affordable. And I think that particularly the lot splits are not moving in that direction. They are a way of basically cramming more large luxury homes into a space that does not do anything for affordability. And this has been a push of the luxury home developers as a sort of Trojan horse for allowing them to build in places and in communities that would not have otherwise allowed it. So I agree that there's not much we can do now. I'm actually very proud of our SB9 ordinance. I think it's one of the best ones that I've read. And I think we were early on recognizing the use of, we called it affordable by design, and that meant to limit the size of the secondary units. And, but there may be some other ideas that come about, and HCD may come up with some other ways if they are honest about achieving affordable housing rather than just luxury housing. So I would not support doing anything now, but wait until we have guidance from HCD and continue to look at what other communities and come back to this after we have guidance from HCD.
Thank you. One comment I would make is that in this case, I know what you mean when you say secondary unit, Councilmember Hudes, but in reality, it's the primary unit, or at least it's the primary unit that'll be built is the smaller unit, because the way we've written this is that if somebody does an SB9 split and wants to develop, the very first unit has to be the smaller one. And I think as we move forward with our housing element, we will have a lot of housing that will be deed restricted, that will have to meet affordability levels. And so this just fills in another area. So I agree with you that this is a good start, and we can always modify. We can modify in the future if it looks like there's other tools. Was there anyone else who wanted to speak before I go back to Councilmember Hudes? Okay.
And I would just say I agree with the mayor about the smaller unit coming first. I think that's another feature of our SB9 that does the best that we can do. And like I said, I think we have an excellent SB9 ordinance, and when we find we can do more about the safety, which I think was just atrocious in the law to put in such a loophole that anything could be built in fire hazard zones, that's the one that I think we need to focus on to make our good law even better.
Okay, so do we need a motion to stay where we are? Okay, so no changes, we don't need a motion. And with that, I think we've hit all the questions from staff, so thank you for keeping me on task. All right, so this item is closed, and I think given that our next item is probably, well, it's going to take us through the rest of the night, I would like to call a 10-minute break. The council had a closed session before this, and I think we need a little break. So it's 8:29, so let's reconvene at 8:40, please. Thank you. Okay, we're going to reconvene. Thank you. Everyone take your seat. Thank you. So now we'll move to item 9, and that will be with our town manager.
Thank you, Council. On February 7th, the Council considered the Senior Services Committee Senior Roadmap, which was a very thorough investigation of our state of senior services and came up with a multitude of goals and recommendations. And there was so much information that we thought we really needed to provide the Council an opportunity for a deeper dive to consider those top line recommendations and provide specific direction to our staff and to the respective committees. Since that time, the Council also decided to start allocating a little bit of leftover American Rescue Plan dollars, of which $225,000 was allocated to the Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation Department to provide senior services into the next fiscal year. And so one of the discussion points for this evening is what does the council envision as core services for those dollars, in light of the fact that they already receive a rent break, and in the lease, as per one of the attachments to the report, the balance there was that Los Gatos Rec would be providing a baseline of senior services. So that's one area of discussion. In addition, the council also directed the town manager's office to consider how it could absorb 0.2 full-time equivalent of a staff person to provide senior services, and I think we would love to get some more definition for what that position would specifically be covering. Among the different items is really recognizing that there is more work to do. Some of this work can be done by members of our community without town involvement, such as item B on the recommendation, which is to work towards establishing a potential 501c3 nonprofit. Staff recommends that we look at the model of the Friends of the Library, which has been very successful. But first we have to establish, or the nonprofit has to be established. So staff would definitely consider that as one of your discussion points tonight. There are transportation recommendations, and staff is recommending that those be referred to our Complete Streets and Transportation Commission. We have wonderful recommendations regarding housing, and obviously housing is a huge issue. It is a strategic priority. But as we are really focused on our housing element, we would respectfully request that we defer action on those and referral until after we complete and certify our housing element. And then we really want to recognize the good work of our Community Health and Senior Services Commission. So in your report tonight is a list of the accomplishments of this particular commission. The commission has also expressed interest in assisting the town council with implementing the senior roadmap, and we'd love to get a discussion going about specifically what areas you see this particular commission having direct involvement, and it is the role of the council to provide that direction to our commissions. You may find that there are other one-year action items from the roadmap that you'd like to pursue that were not specifically identified in the staff report, but are in the roadmap. And then finally, we'd really like to thank all of the Senior Services Committee members for their incredible work. I think we've made a great, we have a wonderful product. They have fulfilled their mission by doing the roadmap. And so staff would recommend that we sunset this commission and encourage those members to engage with the Community Health and Senior Services Commission as private residents to continue to advance the good work that the roadmap has. So with that, staff is available. Director Baker has been leading and supporting the Community Health and Senior Services Commission. And then we're both here to support you as well as other staff. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I see members of the Community Health and Senior Service and the Senior Services Committee in the audience. So welcome. Okay, I'll go to Council Member Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Question for staff. So specifically on item A in the staff report, the ARPA money, I just want to understand a little bit better this town's role in this conversation. So that piece talks about, core services, alternative core services potentially. But Los Gatos Saratoga Rec is a independent JPA. And so I'm kind of wondering what our role is here and how granular we can or should be getting.
Thank you for the question. So let me just get the correct number of the attachment. Attachment 4 to the staff report contains an exhibit from the lease agreement that's known as Exhibit F, and it spells out direct services that are actually obligated in the current lease agreement. And I think it's fair for the council to ask what it expects from this additional money, the $225,000 for next fiscal year. Are there additional services or refinements to the services listed that you would like to see? And I think it is within your purview. We are granting funds, and so you can request. Obviously they have their own governance, they have their own board, and I believe we have staff here this evening under public comment who may wish to discuss that further, should you have specific questions about their capacity.
Continue.
Thank you. Just one quick follow-up on that. So looking at attachment 2 being the letter from LGS Rec, looking through the kind of can offer and cannot offer, looking at how those align with our roadmap and sort of where we would want this money to be spent is the direction we should be providing.
That is certainly one option for your consideration.
Okay, Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. I was wondering if there's another option, and that is to engage the Community Health and Senior Services Commission to meet with LGS Rec and review their proposal and review Exhibit F and review their calendar of actual activities that they've scheduled that are apparent in the print, and then to make a recommendation to the council, keeping in mind a not to exceed of $225,000 over 12 months. With the goal of continuing services at the current level. Is that an option as well, to engage the CHSSC in that?
It is certainly an option, and I would just say it might still be beneficial if council at least put some boundaries or a little bit of direction so it's not entirely open-ended.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question along those lines. I mean, given that this is a lease agreement, I would want to make sure that...
No, that we're not asking it for changes to the lease agreement.
No, I'm looking at the terms in the lease agreement. So, one thing I would want to establish is that the services that are listed are being met. And then I guess the question would be, are there things that the council wants to add? And then I would be comfortable with that, handing it potentially to Community Health and Senior Service and get their input or evaluation. Okay, is it just being met? Could this issue be broadened? How can we get the most for the money that we are giving for our senior services? But I think it should, in my opinion, it should start with the council, and then implementation or conversation can happen through the commission. Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, I agree that it would be helpful for the council to provide direction, but I would also point out that the language in the lease agreement that I'm reading from the staff report from when it was adopted was that LGS Recreation would ensure the provision of services programs to include services programs similar to the following list in scope, because that list of A through J has really not been revised. It's been sort of shaped informally, I would say. And I don't believe there's been a revision to that list since 2009.
Okay, I just want to clarify, I'm looking at the right attachment. It's 1 through 10? You're saying A through J. I'm looking at, it
They're
might be the same
items.
thing.
They were in a staff report.
Okay, so I'm looking at Exhibit F.
Yeah, it's the same items that
Okay.
became Exhibit F. Yeah.
Thank you. So, I think what we want to do, we can take a lot of questions or in general, and then work through each of these items, A through G on the agenda. So, and we need to open to public comment. So are there any other questions of staff right now on all of these topics, or any of these, or the overall process that council members would like to ask before we move to public comment? Council Member Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick kind of general sort of thing. So I'm glad that we're recognizing the work of the Senior Services Committee and also the Community Health and Senior Services Commission this evening in kind of our comments and all of that. I think it'd be nice, and maybe this is more of a question for the mayor, to do some sort of proclamation at a future meeting that just like formally recognizes that body, because I think they put in like a ton of time and energy into this, and I think it'd be just a nice way to show our support.
I will take your suggestion under consideration. Thank you. Okay, anyone else before we move to public comment? All right, then I have 3 cards right now. Looks like we have another card coming up, and I see people on Zoom but no hands raised. So anyone on Zoom, if you would like to speak on this topic, raise your hand. But right now I'm going to focus on those in front of me in the room. And our first speaker will be, oh, hold on. I see a preference for order here. Okay, Jeffrey Blum.
Thank you all. Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Blum. I'm the chair of the Community Health and Senior Services Commission. And I'm not going to speak to all of the items under Agenda Item 9. Specifically, I wanted to speak to first the sunset of the Senior Service Committee. I do think it is appropriate for that time to come. I want to avoid confusion in having several entities dealing with senior services issues. I want to avoid having meetings set up and other activities occurring without my knowing it when I'm the chair of the Community Health and Senior Services Commission, and our commission is supposed to be implementing the roadmap. We are prepared to proceed with the goals, implementing the goals under the roadmap. We have subcommittees set up. We have people who are willing to serve on those subcommittees. We have liaisons, people who are willing to serve as liaisons as needed. For example, perhaps to transportation, to make sure Transportation Commission is implementing the goals under the roadmap. So we're ready to proceed. Along those lines, while we are prepared to go forward and implement the roadmap, I do think it would be worthwhile for us to have the ability to have non-residents serve on the subcommittees for purposes of implementing the roadmap. There are a number of non-residents who I've spoken to, some of whom worked with the Senior Services Committee in creating the roadmap. I think that they would be very valuable additions to our process. So if possible, I'd like to see that happen. The other thing is maybe expanding our commission. It's become quite clear that senior services is a major issue in this town, and the more the merrier. The more people we can have serve on our commission, to implement the roadmap, the better. I don't know if we'll get more people willing to serve, but at least if we have that option, we can attempt to get more people to serve on our commission. The other item, which I've mentioned before, and I've spoken to several of you about it, is having a liaison to our commission from the town council. And Mayor Risto has expressed some possible interest in serving that position. Councilmember Rennie was a liaison to us as we were dealing with the issue of how to expend the initial bundle of ARPA money that we received, and I think he was very instrumental in helping us hone down the issues and focus, and I think your knowledge and experience would be very beneficial to us as we go forward in implementing the roadmap. So,
okay. Your time is up, but I'm going to ask you a question. Can you
Sure.
tell me what your last sentences are, please?
I'm sorry.
Can you conclude, please? That's my question.
No,
Go
I
ahead
was
and
just
conclude.
going to conclude by saying, bottom line is, we're ready to go. We've gone through and outlined the goal, the year one goals for implementing the roadmap, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Moore and then Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you for being here this evening. Just a quick question. How many members are currently on the Senior Services Commission?
I believe there's 6 of us, 7. Well, one I think, are you including the student? Yeah. We have a student member who sadly has not been very good about attending our meetings and participating.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Hudes.
I was thinking along the same lines, and I wanted to ask the question, if it were to expand, how much bigger? And also, would it include more youth commissioners, or would there be a possibility of a sort of more direction to the youth commission for specific activities? It does seem to me that there are a lot of multi-generational aspects of the roadmap, but the youth commissioners that I've observed haven't really had tasks assigned to them and that type of thing.
My impression is that it would be better if we did not have more students involved, because the history has not been good in terms of their participation. Even so much as coming to meetings has been a problem. In terms of the number of additional commissioners, I really don't know, but I think your point is well taken, that there may be other areas other than implementation of the roadmap where we would want commissioners who may have different knowledge and experience to work on. For example, we've decided that we're going to limit, because the roadmap itself, implementation of the roadmap itself is going to be quite a project, that we're only going to have 2 or 3 major goals this year. And one other goal is we've submitted to the council a mental health and substance abuse report, and we would like to develop a roadmap for implementing the recommendations in that report. So if we can get other commissioners, new commissioners, to come in and help with that, that would be great. So, but again, in terms of numbers, I don't know. I don't know what's appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Hudes. Another question for the speaker?
Yeah, I had one other question in terms of thinking about bandwidth of the Community Health and Senior Services Commission. It didn't used to be Community Health and Senior Services. Have you or some of your members given thought to whether Community Health, there's enough work to do in Community Health and enough work to do in Senior, that you would recommend having 2 different bodies?
There have been discussions about that. I'm not sure that would be appropriate. I don't know that you would be able to attract people to another whole other new entity. And as I think we've shown with the mental health and substance abuse report, we are perfectly capable of going into other areas other than senior services. So my personal feeling, and I think the other commissioners agree with me, is that we should just leave it as one commission.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Badami.
Thank you. Are there any current vacancies on the commission? And the reason I ask is because we have a lot of trouble filling some of these spots, and we have to keep re-advertising. So if you could bring me up to speed on the 7, are they all filled at this moment?
Are they all filled? Yeah.
They are.
They
Okay.
are. And in the past, there was trouble filling the commission. And I think the last couple of years, there's been a greater focus on senior services, and my sense of it. And also, we've done a better job, I think, at letting the community know we exist and what we're doing. And so my sense of it is that, my hope is that more people will be interested in serving on the commission. I'm also thinking that if we have the option of adding additional people, and it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. At least we've attempted to do it and get more people involved.
Okay, so I understood your response to be there's been a greater interest in senior services,
Right.
that it's expanded people's interest in it, but not so much community health. It's more just geared towards an interest in senior services?
Well, not necessarily, because I think there was a lot of activity in the community in the last year dealing with mental health and substance abuse and desensitizing, mental health issues. So I think that there is, I think there's a more widespread interest in both aspects.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, my next speaker will be Eleanor Yick.
Good evening, Mayor Ristow, Vice Mayor Badami, and council members. I'm pleased to meet with you tonight and to speak to you tonight about 2 items. One is the budget allocation that's been discussed, and secondly, the recommendation that I heard tonight about work on any issues relating to the housing recommendations. I want to just make a comment about that. First of all, regarding the allocation of $225,000 to the Los Gatos Recreation 55 Program Plus, first, thank you for that amount that you did, but I do want to communicate that I am concerned about it and its impact on the implementation of the senior roadmap, particularly year 1. Looking at the recent communications from the Los Gatos Recreation Department and how it was spelled out, if we got X amount of money, it would be a top-level program, a medium program, and a low program. And looking at the low one, and the allocation needed there was $250,000, so this is approximately $225,000, and noticing the impact that's going to happen, the reduction in staff, the reduction in the ability, for example, to keep the hub up to date, all of those things, and I'm concerned about, the work that's been done and then how it's going to be receiving so much less attention that, of course, it can't be the same quality that it's been so far. The other thing I would like to mention, or I would like to request, that you perhaps relook at that allocation. And I know you have many items that you need to look at and many programs you need to plan for. But I did hear about the unexpected kind of windfall of $1.6 million that had not been allocated out from the ARPA funds. And I'd like to encourage you to relook at that and see if there's some additional money that can be allocated to the 55 Plus program. And lastly, regarding the housing, there is one aspect of it that I think is relatively easy to do and something that's really important in this community, and that is to compile a list of the availability of senior housing that does exist in this community. I mean, I've lived here for 40 years, and just the past year I heard about the Commons, which I'd never heard about before. And I'm sure that there are senior housing abilities that I know nothing about. And I think that would be a real asset to add it also onto the hub. I think of many seniors who move into a community to be closer to their children, and perhaps are not going to be living with their children, but would like to have a senior facility. And it would be wonderful if we could list what's available in the town for them. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for our speaker? Nope. Okay. Thank you. I guess you said it all. Our next speaker is Dick Conrad.
So I'd like to just point out that I submitted as chair last year, a complete report to you on what the accomplishments were. And we pretty much met all the accomplishments last year. And in addition, we monitored the ARPA funds. And I say this only to say, we did it last year. We're ready to do it this year with our new responsibilities. And I think I was hearkened to hear that you want CHSSC to talk to LGS about the program for next year, because I think that it is possible for them to continue this program at the same level using some of their own initiatives. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for our speaker? Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Tom P. Crow.
Good evening and thank you. I've spoken to you already about the roadmap in detail. I want to refer to item F, which asks, are there any additional items that should be considered in year one? And I just wanted to mention two things, if I may. One is under the core services, there is a section S5. I'll read it. It's expand use of parks, community gardens, and other facilities. Perhaps some of our milestone timing wasn't quite as early as it should have been, but this was meant to be the end, the milestone end. And I know, for example, in community gardens, the town director of Public Works and Parks is already has put out a call for RFP for the garden design. I know there's a lot of interest in working on that. I understand from the Parks Commission chair, I believe that they have an interest in taking up some of the items here in project S5, and that would not strain the, using, as you've recommended, Mayor, the use of our commissions, that would not strain the town's other resources in terms of sort of preparing for the next year when we expect to be actually working on maybe moving dirt and other things for our community gardens. And this is very much in line with your DEI effort of the town. And so I think it would be nice to recognize that aspect. Perhaps that would fit in okay. The second item I'll refer to is actually in communications and engagement goal, and that's C1. And that's where we felt that in this partnership, primarily between the CHSSC and LGS Recreation 55 Plus program of developing the hub, this information database center on the web, that we have a beta version that we're really excited about. But I think that's something that should be continued sort of as a continuous thing. There are new things coming on all the time. I know Lisa Ann Kennedy gets people coming in with needs, and you suddenly realize, oh, we could do that. I was in a meeting related to the state, and also discovered a new site that, gee, we really should have that. So I think that may go outside the original agreement, of course, with the LGS rec, but I think that would be something if we could somehow, C1 could consider. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like you have a question from Councilmember Rennie.
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand. My understanding, the recommendation in here seemed to be covering everything that was planned for year one, and you're asking us to add a couple things. So are these items that were not meant for year one, or am I misunderstanding?
Let's see. Some items were pulled off for your in your agenda from year one, but there are many others here. And I could read, for example, from Project C1 for the Information Hub, there under that 1, 2, 3 bullet set or target various quarters of 2023. As I said, we were a little off on the parks one. We had that the first quarter of 24, but we did have an exercise program in the fourth quarter of 23, for example, to consider, which might be something done with community support in that S5 as well. So I have to say there are other items, but I only wanted to call two because I know you're limited in what can be taken on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. We have one final speaker. I don't see any hands raised. And then I have to say my iPad died. It's not charged. So if we have a charger for my iPad, I apologize. It's like government iPad. I can take care of that after the speaker, but I have all my notes on here. And our final speaker is Lisanne Kennedy. Oh, we do have somebody on Zoom, but our next speaker is Lisanne.
Hello, everybody. So I just wanted to point out a few things kind of after some of the discussion that was here and hopefully add to that a little bit. So just as a reminder, the ARPA funding that we received was $328,500. With that, we had an exceptional year. We had over 730 members. We offered 1,560 programs to seniors. If you're comparing that directly to the 2009 lease, we greatly exceeded any of those expectations in the lease, and our goal would be to be able to continue to offer a thriving program to the seniors in this community. And also I want to point out that our spending as an agency was above that grant funding, and a lot of that expansion did happen in the second half of the year. So when looking at this year's budget, we did anticipate an inflation of costs so that we could continue at that really high level. And also right now for 2023, we're fully taking that on as an agency. So just a few things to point out there. And then with the current level of service, on Tuesday, I spoke to the commission and I pulled up the lease document from 2009 and went over the certain areas that we are greatly exceeding that. One would be the newsletter. According to the 2009 lease, we'd be required to do that bi-monthly. But I want to remind everyone that communication and engagement was a key goal for the roadmap, and I feel like we're filling a large piece of that with the monthly publication of the print. Also, quarterly dances, we're doing those monthly. Socials have expanded greatly from the couple that are listed to 1 or 2 every month. So right now, the current level of service is well above that 2009 lease document. So I just wanted to point out that the level of funding needed to sustain the current level of service would be higher. And also I want to clarify the case manager role because there's been some confusion in our request for that since it was a 0.2 FTE that we requested, which was the same amount as requested in the roadmap for a town liaison. These are two separate things. In our minds, having a case manager role, especially this year after we launched the hub, It would allow us to have one-on-one appointments, support groups for caregivers, cancer, and grief, to host an annual health fair, and to continue to support the hub. This week alone, I received calls about headstones, divorce, audiology. We're handling so many topics, and having someone that could help support our seniors that are looking for those things would be a huge asset. So I ask that you consider the 55+ program as a whole and not just the individual items in the 2009 lease, because we're really doing so much more than that and achieving so much more than that.
Thank you. Councilmember Hughes has a question for you.
Thank you, and I want to take the time to thank you personally for your efforts, your force of will, and your individual impact on restoring services for our senior community. It has been quite remarkable to see what's happened and what's been achieved, and so I want to thank you for that. But I wanted to ask a few questions about the finances. You mentioned, exceeding what is listed in the lease, but wasn't there also a rent abatement that went on at the same time that you were exceeding those?
So yes, and unfortunately Nancy's not here tonight to speak to the lease, but we have been treating those as two separate things because we are hoping to secure funding for the 55+ program so that we can continue with its sustainability.
Okay, thank you. And I won't get into lease abatement. It is not agendized, but the agreement itself talks about rent abatement in return for those services. And so that was one thing I wanted to draw out. Then the other was the ARPA grant of $328,000. That, I believe, was expended over longer than a year. Isn't that correct? It was expended over 16 to 18 months time frame?
So technically when we received the funds was September, but again, the kind of with me coming in and getting caught up to speed and then really being able to allocate those funds and to grow our staffing and programs took time. Mm-hmm. So the greater amount of that spending and that growth, especially towards staff FTEs, again happened in the latter part of the year when we saw that demand in services and demand in programs that we were running. Okay, thank you. And I had one last question, and that is something that was discussed a little bit earlier, and that is, would LGS REC be open to working with the CHSSC to finalize the set of services at a fairly detailed level for whatever the grant amount is for the next year? Yeah, I think we've already been heavily involved with the commission and the committee throughout the whole year, not just in respect to the ARPA funding, but in respect to growing communication in both of our reciprocating relationships. So I don't have any objections to working with them. The only thing I would ask again is that we consider the 55+ program as a whole and not individual pieces, because it does take a team to be able to offer those things. Right. I think you've made a good point about that. I do think that I appreciate your answer, because I think that along with a grant of a very large amount of money, one of the largest community type of grants that the town does, it's important to think about accountability and engagement on both sides in terms of what would be delivered for that grant. And so thank you for considering that. And just one comment on that, this year with the ARPA grant funding, we are in the habit of reporting all of our expenses, of reporting to the commission whenever they asked of us a full detailed report, kind of barring everything that we've done and where the spending has gone. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore has a question.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for your clearly overwhelming commitment to Los Gatos and our seniors. I wanted to ask about the case manager specifically. So would this be an existing staff member taking on a role, or are you hoping to hire someone at 1 day a week?
So the hope is to hire someone that has the experience and expertise to really make that a credible and valuable resource, whether that's a social manager or a social worker or a case manager. But it's finding and having that right amount of funding for that person. Right now, our staff is handling, like I said, all sorts of different questions and things. But having that go-to person in the community, I think, would be a huge asset and also help with so many of the things that are listed on the senior roadmap.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I agree that a case manager is an incredibly important role. I think that just in our discussions with the other 0.8 or the 0.2 FTE, we've heard some potential difficulty about hiring a person at that level. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
So one thing on that, I have looked into like surrounding communities and what they have, if they have something available. So I did take that into account with the finances and making it hopefully an appealing offer for somebody.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I have no more cards, but I do have a hand raised on Zoom. So Ali Miano, you may speak.
Hi, just really quick. I just wanted to thank the Senior Services Committee for all their hard work. I got to interact with them a little bit as a Complete Streets and Transportation Commissioner, and I was really heartened to see that we're all on the same page in wanting more public transportation and more outreach to and access for seniors. So again, thanks to them for all their hard work. And I hope that we are working together in some capacity in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Miano? Okay. All right. Seeing no other hands up on Zoom and no other cards, I will close the public comment and move to discussion and questions from the council. And, oh, okay, Town Manager.
I just wanted to suggest that if it's easier for the council to take some of these items in a different order, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you. And actually, before we launch into this, I just want to make a comment because I value all of our commissions and all of our commissioners. And I feel like at different times, interest in the community ebbs and flows. I've sat on, I think, 4 different commissions before I was on the council, and I viewed it as part of my role of being on the commission to go out and recruit people. So to the extent that a commission is doing work in which they feel invested, they'll go out and find more members. The other thing I want to point out is, having sat on these commissions, several years ago it was decided to place a youth commissioner on each of the adult commissions. And that has actually been a really enlightening experience, at least on the transportation commissions where I sat. And what I'll say is our youth commissioners are possibly the busiest, most accomplished people in this community. And so plus or minus, when they get assigned or they choose one of the adult commissions to sit on, they also sit on the youth commission that sets its own priorities. So I would not want to assign a priority to a youth commission. They already set their priorities for the year and they turn over every year. But every one of those students seems to be taking 15 AP classes, playing varsity sports, running a club, doing other things. So I think in understanding how they perform in our community, by the time they're on an adult commission, the value I've seen is their perspective that they can bring as a youth member, and not necessarily that they're going to have the bandwidth between meetings to be on 3 ad hocs or do a lot of other work. So I just want to make sure that that's recognized. And I know that there was absolutely no disrespect meant, but I also know that having sat on adult commissions, sometimes when you're looking for people to go out and collect data or do other things, you're looking at 3 commissioners plus your youth commissioner that brings a unique perspective, but necessarily does not have that commission as their highest priority and ability to do things. So I just want to put that out there because I want our youth commission to understand how greatly appreciated they are, and that giving up that additional time to sit on another commission is appreciated. Thank you. So if anyone wants to change the order, otherwise we can just go through these, like discuss A first, which is identify specific core senior services. And, you know, at our last meeting, we allocated this amount of money. I think what we had, $225,000. I think what we're talking about is how do we look at what we've asked the rec department to provide, look at what is absolutely required by the lease agreement, and see where there's areas that they've added more or what can be done. But right now, I think we're in a point of looking at, here's the money we've allocated, this is the work we'd like to see done, and how do we make sure that we can work together with the rec department. So do I have any comments, questions, input? Vice Mayor, oh, you're pointing, I'm sorry. If you move, you're going to get called on. Councilmember Hudes.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate the letter that came in from LGS Rec. I had a chance to review that back in, I think it was December of last year. And I think that a couple of things to point out about it. One is that there's input, I believe, on our Community Health and Senior Services Commission that would be valuable to shaping the specifics. The engagement, particularly the engagement, communications and engagement group has been very involved in many of these things, spends a lot of time with these activities, and I think that overall, what I've heard, and maybe heard two different things tonight, but I think from one commissioner we heard that the amount that had been allocated should be able to cover, and from another encouraging us to allocate more. I don't know that I have more insight, even having spent a fair amount of time on it, to be able to offer the specifics, except to look at the big picture, which is that the run rate of that grant that was made is just about the same. So that $328,500 over 16 to 18 months is almost the same as $225,000 over a year, and the grant is for a year. So it seems to me like it's pretty close to a way to fund current services, and so on that one specifically, what I was going to suggest is that the CHSSC meets with LGS Rec, reviews the proposal, reviews the actual activities that are found in the print calendar, because there's a whole set of things that are listed in there, and the list of activities that are services in Exhibit F, and make recommendations to the council for the services using a not to exceed of $225,000 over 12 months, with the goal of continuing services at the current level. And that would include continuing to invest in the hub. And maybe that's an area where we might get some of our youth who are capable, who might have an interest in further developing the app or giving guidance on how to develop it as well. But that's what I was going to suggest on with regard to A, that we give that general direction.
Councilmember Rennie, and then Councilmember Moore.
And I like that idea. Let the commission work with them. You know, when I look through the list of some of the things that they that LGS Rec thinks needs to be reduced, I think there might be ways to still keep some of those, particularly engaging more of the service clubs, which particularly like doing these kinds of things. When we gave plenty of money, I got a feeling that, you know, like putting on the Thanksgiving dinner, the LGS Rec was able to fully staff it and provide all the food. But I know in the past, the service clubs have donated food, they've donated more members. So, and I know some members of the commission are also in the service clubs, so they already have a feel for how that works. So in this discussion with LGS Rec, you know, not just deciding what we should have and not have, but also maybe do some creative brainstorming how we do more with the dollars that is being assigned, and finding other resources in the community to help make it happen.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in total agreement with what Councilmember Hudis said. I think that's all really well taken, and I really appreciate your expertise coming from being so involved with this process. All three of you, actually, I really appreciate that. So the maybe two suggestions I have. I'll be really curious to see kind of what Community Health and Senior Services comes up with, and I think if there is something like this case manager, right? There's a specific dollar ask here. If that commission determines that is something that is integral, I'd want to hear that too. And when we come back to our ARPA discussion, that's not something I would take off the table of allocating that additional dollar. But I agree with all of the comments that I think seeing a little bit more out of what's currently here would be good. And I'd also, as Community Health and Senior Services discusses this, I'd also want to hear from them kind of what their priorities are going to be. And we talked about kind of 3 different big pots and seeing how those align with what might be lost or gained here.
Okay. Vice Mayor Badami.
So I'm just looking to staff. You may be getting direction from 5 different council members, but it appears for the most part we have consensus. Will you be looking for a motion as we work through these?
I would say it would be very helpful if it was solidified into a motion. And if you would like to do those in as one final motion capturing everything, or if you wanted to do a motion for each one, which might be a little bit more manageable, but having that solidified in a motion would be very helpful for us moving forward.
Right, and I think I'll be looking for a motion on each of these items. Councilmember Hudis.
If it's appropriate, I'd make a motion on this one.
I think it is.
So with regard to A, identify specific core senior services, I move that the Community Health and Senior Services Commission meet with Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation, review their proposal, review the actual activities schedule that can be found in the print, and the list of services in Exhibit F of the 2009 lease agreement, and make recommendations to the council for services not to exceed $225,000 over 12 months, with the goal of continuing services at the current level.
I'll second that motion. Sorry. I guess we all are in favor. So any other discussion on this? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No one opposed. The motion passes 5-0.
I do want to make a comment about that.
But I want to ask, so the motion is clear for staff? Okay, perfect. Councilmember Hudis.
I do want to make a comment that since the lease agreement references rent abatement in return for services, and we're not talking about the lease agreement tonight, I would just encourage that work to just wait until we know what the final number should wait until we know whether there will be any rent abatement, because it is significant to those decisions about what to cut or what to include. It's just a comment.
I would think the work could start right now and adjustments can be made if necessary. So, okay. Councilmember Moore.
And I'll make one last comment, sorry to speak out of turn, but I also think it's important that, just in direction to our partner here, if you're not able to meet, this level of service, I think it's important for us to know that as well, so we know where we do have to cut, so we don't just end up kind of arbitrarily losing different things.
Thank you. So I understand the motion to basically include that the discussion will be $225,000. We want to keep the same services. You need to meet the requirements of the lease, and have that discussion of how that can be met. And if that is shaped by more volunteers are needed, or if it's like, oh, maybe this needs to be dropped and this was an extra, what that looks like, and bring that back to the council. So the council would have the ultimate say. That is correct? Okay, Councilmember Hudes.
Just one more comment about it is that I think that it would be a step toward better engagement and accountability. And, you know, it works both ways. If the town isn't living up to its end of the bargain, then we'll know about that better because of the involvement of the Community Health and Senior Services. With regard to the case manager, I actually had a question on that. In the 2009 lease agreement, case management was excluded from the responsibilities for LGS recreation, and that it was stated at that time, I believe, that 0.5 FTE case manager would be provided by the town, and that the town would then look for potentially other sources to provide that as the individual transitioned their role into LGS Rec. I'm interested in your perspective about whether it's needed. It's been a long time since that position was filled, and whether the town envisions providing that case management service.
Thank you for the question. I wasn't here during that particular era when we had a community services department, so I'm not that familiar. I know we had an individual who provided multiple types of services, and as people retired, you know, those services essentially went away, and we were in the Great Recession, so as people retired, council decided to essentially reduce certain services and focus more on core services. So at this point, I have not received council direction to pursue expanding services beyond what we are currently providing. If council wants to expand services in new areas, as new municipal services, then we need to have a conversation about what we don't do. I know in existing departments, we have need for additional resources. People are working very hard to keep up with the demands, with all the unfunded mandates, and it's getting to be more and more challenging to keep up with service quality and all these new unfunded mandates. So we will need to be talking about how we need to augment just even core services beyond just adding new services.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to B, which is focused community efforts toward establishing a potential 501c3 for fundraising for ongoing senior service expenditures and or future renovation or rebuilds of the adult rec center. To me, that seems pretty straightforward that is, I mean, staff outlined how that could go forward, but it sounds like that is, we say, go forth and create a 501c3. Director Baker, could you talk me through that?
Yeah, so Tom Crow was, as a community member, not as a member of any board or commission, did receive apply for and receive a community innovation grant to start the funding for a 501c3. That will happen, I believe, sort of through its own course. As a 501c3, it is a separate and independent organization, so you really wouldn't have any control over that. I think what we're looking at more is the role of the 501c3 and how we can partner with them as we move forward. There may be things that we're looking at that would be better suited for the 501c3 to have in terms of what they're working on rather than have it be on the town end. What I was looking at was kind of the way that we have the Friends of the Library set up. Friends of the Library is a separate 501c3. Really handles all volunteer things out of their own prerogative, under their own board, under their own management. And the library side, even though we're cooperating with them, we have we're very hands-off with that. So when we're looking at volunteerism, when we're looking at engaging volunteers in the community that want to get involved with what would potentially be this new 501c3, it may be better suited for that 501c3 to take those types of roles rather than having it be coordinated on the city staff side. So there's an advantage there, and I think there's a very good working model. So I think it's just sort of maybe establishing, as it's established, kind of setting the separation of where we're going to be. So separation of kind of work there, so we don't have the duplication, but also how we can best partner. And then when they are actually formed, it would be writing a letter of agreement so that we kind of finalize that.
Okay, okay, Councilmember Rennie.
So my thought, so what I just heard, and my thought is, the purpose of the 501c3 is to help raise money that can be used to help pay for services or work towards capital improvements. The faster we can get money coming in, the faster we can get something going. What I heard was, I look at it and I think, well, it's mostly somebody, not staff, doing something, but I heard there's some mentoring or suggestions or direction that staff can give. So my thought is, we should put a priority on enabling the others to get started on this as quickly as possible. If they need some input from us, let's make a priority that we do it today instead of, when we get through with all the many things we're doing. So my comment is, there isn't that much work we have to do, but I think it's a great piece of work to move things forward. So let's make sure we put a priority to enable others to do their work.
Okay. Vice Mayor Badami.
I think it's worthy of a motion at this point in time, unless others have comments, since we're progressing here. So I agree with Councilmember Rennie. Focus community efforts towards establishing a potential 501c3 for fundraising, for ongoing senior services, expenditures and/or future renovation, rebuild of the adult recreation center, and that we realize the importance, or it is important, that it remain legally, financially, and administratively separate from the town.
Councilmember Hudes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. It looks like we've talked about this issue. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, now we move on to C, referring the Transportation Year 1 action items to Complete Streets and Transportation Commission for consideration and addition of its work plan for 2023. And the one thing I want to bring up is the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission, at least on our working calendar, is set to come before the council on April 18th. So, as we work through this, what we decide to ask them to take on, we can have that discussion at that meeting, and they'll have a chance to meet twice before then. They meet this Thursday and they'll meet before that meeting. So do I have any discussion, questions, comments? There was, let's see, yeah, Councilmember Hudes.
No, my only comment was that having a work plan and a date to present that work plan to the council is great. If we can get it all by April 18th, in terms of get it all, meaning incorporate the senior services year 1 activities, I think that would be terrific. So I would be completely supportive as it's written.
Having served on a commission and having been handed requests to do things, I think what would be important is maybe having that discussion on the 18th where the commission could come back to us and say, okay, here's the items. I mean, as I look through the items under transportation, most, if not all of them, are actually not specifically senior. Whatever is helpful for transportation for seniors is helpful for everyone. So it may be that some of these already fit with priorities the commission has. It may be that some of these are priorities that they would add, but they have to look at what their workload is, and they may not necessarily want to drop all of their priorities that they've already adopted. So I would think that, yeah, I would be in favor of referring these items to Complete Streets and Transportation, and then having them come back to us on April 18th for a discussion of what is in their bandwidth. Would you like to turn that into a motion?
Yeah, you made the motion.
Okay,
essentially said-
so that is my motion. Do we have a second? Councilmember Hudes?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? I'll call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. It's easy to hand work to other people. So our next is defer the housing, this is D, defer the housing year one items to a future council discussion and direction after certification of the, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what it came up with, was the housing year one action items for future council discussion and direction after certification of the housing element. So I think that was, there were a lot of issues around housing and implementation plans. And because we're in the middle of our housing element, it seems like we need to finish that, get it certified, and then look at our implementation plans and how they relate either specifically to seniors or generally to housing that would benefit seniors. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with those comments. Just one question to staff. So the comment we received from Ms. Yick is about the availability of senior housing in Los Gatos. I can't totally remember exactly what the verbiage is in the draft housing element, but I believe there's an implementation program that it's something like this. Is that accurate?
Well, you know, we gather a lot of data for the housing element. There's a whole needs assessment that's done, and we may have resources that pertain to that particular roadmap goal. We can go back to our the assessment that we've done, as well as just our knowledge of the town, and together with the work that CHSSC is going to be doing with Los Gatos Rec, you know, if this does become part of the hub, if we have existing material, we're happy to provide it. No reason to wait. So, and there may be several other aspects of the roadmap. If it's just a matter of uncovering data that already exists, we're happy to advance the communication and engagement in those areas.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful. And I would be very supportive of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, thanks. You know, on that one, I've had a number, during this course of this process of reaching out to our older adult community, I've had a number of people just say, I don't know what the options are for me in Los Gatos, and it's buried here or there. But for people who need to make a decision and need to make it quickly, it does seem like it would be valuable to put out our best efforts at publishing an inventory with contact information, and so that people could do that. Now, I generally agree with D, because I don't think that the certification, that's going to happen this year, right? So it has to happen this year. So maybe this one could get prioritized such that immediately after the certification, we turn our attention to publishing this inventory that Ms. Yick described, going beyond whatever we have now. I also think it might be helpful to the creation, the final draft of the housing element, because we may uncover that there are some affordable housing of a senior nature that we haven't yet really included in our housing element. So it does seem like it would be valuable to start gathering now, and then still within the calendar year, immediately after the certification, to try to achieve that goal. That would be my suggestion on that one.
One comment I'll make, I think to the extent that we can make a list of places that I guess are specifically restricted to seniors? Is that what we're talking about with senior housing, or just all rental? I mean, it sounds like I want to put some boundaries around it. So I guess if there's senior housing, whether it is in a senior community, if it's a retirement facility, whatever, I think what I would not ask staff to do is nobody's going to be able to maintain what the vacancies are or anything. It's just, here's the contacts, here's the commons, here, et cetera, and what type of housing it is. And that would be helpful, because somebody moving here or looking around may not know where the senior communities are. But I would not want that to include maintaining what vacancy rates are, or, you know, helping place people. I think that's too much work.
I would agree. I think those are parts of the work plan later. But for year one, the initial was just let's write down what they are, because it would be very helpful to our residents, some of whom have to make quick decisions.
Yeah, and I think that it should be a high priority. I would also say that once the housing element is certified, there's a lot of items, implementation programs that have to go into effect, including amendments to the general plan and other things. So I think I'll leave it to staff to figure out in what order, but it sounds like that would happen fairly quickly. Motion? Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, so I move to defer housing year one action items for future council discussion and direction after the certification of the housing element, and to prioritize the creation of a senior housing inventory immediately or soon after the certification.
Okay. Do I have a second from Councilmember Moore?
Second.
Okay. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed. The motion passes 5-0. Any questions from staff? Thank you. Okay. Next, we will move to E, which is recognizing the recent accomplishments of the Community Health and Senior Services Commission, discuss the capacity of this Community Health and Senior Services Commission, and identify specific year one priorities from the roadmap for the work plan. So I'll go to Director Baker.
Yes, in your packet, you'll see the CHSSC's game plan for year one, as they titled it. It's fairly well conceived and detailed in terms of how they have picked their year one items, what they plan to do in terms of forming the subcommittees in order to address those things, and everything falls within what they believe is their capacity to achieve. They are raring to go. I believe that they would have jumped in it already if they didn't. If it wasn't on this meeting, I had to hold them back at the last meeting so that they didn't get away from me there. So they did hold off, waiting your decision and you looking at that particular game plan they put together. But they are ready to go, and what they presented represents what they feel their capacity is. That said, you may want to look at it, see if there's anything on there that would be better served by different commissions, or if there is anything on there that that you feel should be pulled back in terms of the way that you see capacity, or any other changes that you might want to make. And we would ask also that you take a look at their fantastic accomplishments for last year, which were also included in the packet, and just make sure that we give a good kudos there.
Yeah, I'm very impressed. Okay, I'll go to Councilmember Moore before I make any comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think the game plan is good. I like that it's called a game plan. It does express the enthusiasm that I'm feeling from the group. One question for staff is the suggestion of non-residents on a subcommittee or non-commission members on a subcommittee or ad hoc. Is there a possibility to make some exceptions here to allow for that?
So I can speak to that. So I've been looking into that a little bit, and it depends. There's different ways to set up a subcommittee, but if it's relying on the less than the quorum exception to the Brown Act, then it would need to be composed solely of members of the committee. And I believe all those committee members are residents. But there are other avenues, and so I'm researching those, and I'll get back to the group.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think if that'd be possible, that'd be great. I think it'd also be an easier way than going back out and recruiting for, the expansion of the whole commission, to just get a few more engaged members who have certain expertise on certain areas that the commission's kind of looking at. I don't see any harm there.
One of the questions I had along those lines is, given that there are really helpful people that could be resources that may not be members, do they necessarily have to be on a subcommittee, or can they attend a subcommittee meeting and be a resource? They can attend a commission meeting and speak on a topic, but not necessarily be required to attend the meetings. I mean, how do we deal with that? Because certainly I've sat on commissions where, Tyler Taylor used to come and report to Transportation and Parking about the RIDE program and answer our questions, and we could talk to him. He wasn't a member of our commission, but he provided a lot of content and information. So is there something parallel to that?
Absolutely. Your subcommittee, unless I'm told otherwise, your subcommittee can absolutely go out and consult with experts in all different fields. Those experts can be brought in for multiple meetings and help craft whatever it is the subcommittee is doing. I think there's an incredible value in doing that, and I think that's part of what the subcommittee would do, just as part of their normal work, would be to seek out experts and get their opinions in order to formulate the work that they're doing.
Okay, because as I'm looking at what they want to engage on, I can imagine meeting with different people, but I don't think we need to start looking at the enabling resolution to make that possible.
That's correct. Those subcommittees, without bringing them in as part of the committee officially, can absolutely consult and have all kinds of different opinions and all kinds of different people involved in their decision-making process. They're just not part of the actual subcommittee themselves. So.
Okay, because I'm leaning toward asking the commission to do the work they can and pull in the experts without us having to look at enabling resolutions or do anything convoluted.
That could work as well. Yes.
That we don't do. Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. I'm very excited about the Community Health and Senior Services Commission taking a lead role. I think they're best oriented toward leading the implementation of roadmap. But I want to be realistic, and I think that the bandwidth of the CHSSC, if you just look at what we have just reviewed tonight, and their game plan is 3 subcommittees that they would have. I would imagine 3 to 4 people on a subcommittee, plus serving as a liaison to 4 other bodies. And that would be, if you looked at that over the number of people that are on the commission, that would make each commission member have to serve on 2 or 3 other bodies. And even the planning commissioners typically don't serve on more than 2. And so I'm concerned that in concentrating all of the implementation in the CHSSC as it's currently structured, we're limiting what can be achieved by increasing community engagement. So if we have residents and broader community members willing to pitch in on this work, we need to find a way to say yes, not to say no, that, we don't want to change anything because we're going to get exactly what we had that got us to where we were. So I think that hearing from the town attorney on what can be accomplished with subcommittees would be very important. I think it would absolutely need to include some non-residents, some people who've been very engaged in the work so far. We had about 17 people engaged, and that's just to do the plan. Now we're talking about actually implementing, and so I really think we should be realistic. Otherwise, this roadmap becomes window dressing, and I think most of the people who've been involved in this long process don't want to see that happen. Understanding that there are going to be constraints because of staff, time, et cetera, that has to be taken into account, but I do think that there are members of the community who are ready and willing to jump in, and we need to try to find the right structure to do that. And if we need to, maybe hear back from the attorney on that next time, that would be fine. The other thing that I think has been very helpful to the process of the committee developing and coming to a recommendation that's realistic has been in the involvement of the council members and the mayors. We had both mayors involved during their terms and one council member, myself, and we were not just spectators. We were involved in engaging in the conversation and challenging and reminding what is possible under certain experiences that we have. And so I think, although it does break the mayor's suggestion of not changing the enabling resolution, I think it would be very helpful to have one council member or two, if the majority of the council prefers, as either members or non-voting members or liaisons formally appointed on the commission to help them and to drum up the enthusiasm and frankly to have them have some skin in the game of improving lives for our seniors. So those are some thoughts on the game plan. I love the game plan. I just think that it needs a little expansion to be realistic.
Stepping back from that, I just wanted to go back to what the Community Health and Senior Service Commission put out for the plans for what they wanted to do. And when I look at it, one of the things is it talks about the transportation options and having a liaison. I don't think they need a liaison. My view is we've got this plan, and I think it takes more people to make a plan than to implement it, because it's now broken down into short, medium, and long-term goals, and we can see what can be done. But I would say that, when we delegate something to community or to Complete Streets and Transportation, that's theirs. They report back to the council. They're advisory to the council. I don't think we need, commission members are welcome to attend any meetings they want, but they may not want to attend 7:30 a.m. Thursday morning meetings where there's full agenda items and your item might only be on there every other month or something. I don't know, but I'm not seeing that it's necessary to have a liaison. And similarly for the housing, there's not going to be a liaison to the housing element. So those things I think would alleviate some work. One of the things I was thinking about is, overall, resource limitations have to temper some expectations. So I look at this plan and it's amazing, and it pulled a lot of work together, and the engagement by the community was really inspiring. And I know that this plan is going to move forward. I just want to remind people that we have a variety of plans and we have a lot of strategic priorities. So, I was looking back, and we have a bike and pedestrian master plan that was approved in 2017, and that had projects that were short, medium, and long-term in my mind. And the short-term plans, the 0 to 5 year, there were 57 items that were proposed to be completed in the first 5 years. 17 of them have been. That's not due to a lack of desire, need. There's a lack of ability to walk and chew gum and ride a unicycle, and we've got funding restrictions. So I just want to say that when I look at the senior services roadmap, I see an amazing plan. I want to see it all implemented. I will cheer for it as much as possible, but I also look at those 1 year items might really be a 0 to 3 year, and the 5 year or the 3 year might really be 5 year, and the 10 year might actually be 15. It doesn't mean it has to be that way, but I think setting those expectations, because I'm looking at, we had the Dixon parking study, and, I was doing parking counts in 2017. That report was completed in 2019. And, due to the pandemic, but due to other things, that rollout has been slower than we would have expected. It's, someone joked, it's the speed of government. It doesn't mean that if you don't set that goal, it doesn't happen. It just may not happen when you want. The Bike and Ped Master Plan, 2017, updated in 2020, being updated now. All of those projects that are critical, that are life-saving, that are mode shift changing, that are beneficial to seniors, that are beneficial to students, are happening, but not on the time scale that was originally hoped for. We have a DEI work plan coming forward that will take time to unfold. So I'm not trying to throw cold water on this. I'm saying that I want to see this plan happen and I want people to be engaged, but we also have other things going on. So I want to make sure that as we engage people, we set realistic expectations and set the highest priorities in that plan so we can make it happen and pull things along. Because I feel like pretty much everything in this senior roadmap is beneficial to our entire community. If it's housing, it matters for everybody. If it's transportation, it matters for everybody. If it's volunteering and engagement with our service groups, it's helpful to everybody because all of us will be seniors, but also things that matter to seniors matter to everybody in our community. So I'm just saying, ultimately, timelines are relative, and the decisions we have to make right now, I'm not trying to drag this out. I'm trying to be realistic about how it can be accomplished and how we also continue to pull all of our other priorities along at the same time. So, when I look at this plan, I think it's a good one. Should we add any more commissioners? I don't know. I would like to see the commission move forward with this plan and see how it goes before we make any changes, and say that you can pull in outside assistance when possible. Okay, Vice Mayor Badami.
I'm going to keep this very positive after hearing all that. One of the things we're doing is recognizing the accomplishments of the commission, and I want to recognize all that hard work that you did. It was so impressive. Along with the Senior Services Committee, as Councilmember Moore brought up, I think a proclamation is in order for everyone that was involved in this. So thank you for that. As far as adding more commission members, I don't know how I feel about that, but I think I know what I do feel about liaison is we could maybe have at least 2 council members as liaisons to the commission, being that in the past having former mayors and council members on there that were so effective. I think that is something that would be very doable and could help this roadmap move along. And I'm going to be very optimistic that we really get ourselves in gear here and accomplish what we can in year 1. I think we've got a lot of motivation and passion that I'm trying to stay positive and think that we can do it.
I'm super positive we can do it. I'm just setting expectations for a timeline. Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, whether we can do it or not, we don't know. But we do know that we have to start by really trying to change things here, because what we were doing for a long time was not serving our older adult community. And so I would be very much in favor of finding a way to create subcommittees with real members who show up and are given tasks and do things, not just walk in and offer advice once in a while, and figure out a way to structurally do that. I would be very much in favor of liaisons from the council. And I would also, one of the key elements of the report is to issue an annual report and to measure what we're doing and are we improving. and to help which is one of the subcommittees that's been identified by the game plan that focuses on that. So I think we need to do whatever we can to move things along, and if that means making a change or council members being expected to spend some time on this, I'm very much in favor of that. I understand and we have a wonderful bike and ped master plan. This plan is quite large in scope, but doesn't require as much physical change and capital budget to implement. Many of the things in here are things that can be done with the people in town, and so I would hope that we would not back off of our expectations on this. I did have one other item, which is a little bit off track. I don't know where we're going with all of this right now, but there was another item that was raised by Mr. Pickrow and was actually part of the year one recommendation. I don't know if it's appropriate to talk about that now, because I think there is an item for that, but I don't think we really covered it.
Right. Maybe we can take that under F, which was the other.
Under F. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Moore.
I'll just chime in briefly with my thoughts. I think there's largely consensus here. I think that most of us seem to be on the same page generally about, and so I think a good option could be having the town attorney explore these subcommittee options, but in the interim, have the CHSSC invite folks that they might want to serve in those capacities and have that kind of area expertise to serve there. And then I don't see the need for 2 council members to serve on the commission as liaisons. I think 1 is sufficient, but if other people feel strongly about that, I understand.
Vice Mayor Badami.
I brought up 2 because I thought that there's an interest on some of the council members that I've seen in the past and might be in the future. Now, I'm not necessarily volunteering myself, so I just want to make that clear, but I think it's a discussion we could all have.
And I do want to be positive. I'm so encouraged because it sounds like the Community Health and Senior Services Commission, I listened to the discussion. You're ready to take this plan and move forward with it and show that leadership in the community and pull in what you need to do. And I think that is really commendable. And you're also I realize that you'll have to drop some other priorities, but continuing with the mental health work, you're still keeping the community health side of it. And so I think that this commission recognizes all of the work lying ahead of it and not dropping everything that you've done up to this point. And so I appreciate that. And I think every one of you has given a lot of thought to what the workload will be. So I know that this is going to be successful, and I know that you will figure out what resources you need, and we can probably adapt as we go along. I personally would only be supporting 1 council member. I don't think we want to start adding, I think about the fact that, we could start adding council liaisons to every commission, and then it becomes like the youth commission and it gets a little bit crazy. But I think council members can always attend these meetings, and when there's volunteer work to be done, there's always opportunities. I also like to view our commissions as not only advisory to the council, but independent of the council, so that the commission can do its work without having the council showing up and managing or overshadowing. Because I think that people join a commission because they have a passion and potentially an expertise in that area. And I think that it benefits the council when you come to us with your work and your ideas. And so, I'm almost tempted not to have a council person on there or as a liaison, but, periodically maybe we can check in. I don't know. I'm on the fence, but I just feel like I don't want to take anything away from the work that you can do on your own. You've been handed this plan, and I think you should be the ones running with it. with the support of staff. Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, I'm not sure about one or two, but I would just remind us that something that happened to me when I tried to speak at the Finance Commission is that as a council member, I was not permitted to speak. So the degree of participation with something that needs to move this fast, I think requires more than just checking in with the council periodically at the stage that we're at. And so I would think it'd be wise to consider having at least one, if not two, because that's what worked on the Senior Services Committee. It just seemed to really work well, and two that had a little bit different perspective. But I would be happy with either one. I think that's it's really important at the stage that this is at right now. Anyway, I don't know where we're going with this, whether we're going to need a motion on this, but I don't want to forget about the other additional item.
Right. I want to ask a question of the town attorney because specifically because Councilmember Hudes brought up the Finance Commission. That is an odd situation because we do have 2 council members on there. So that means any other council member watching can't speak. So I have a question. If we have a commission meeting and there are 2 or fewer council members watching the meeting, can they speak like a member of the public?
I remember looking at this when it came up with the Finance Commission, and as I recall, it was a strict prohibition on discussions, like any type of discussion.
That's because there's 2 council members already on the commission.
And so it became, once there are deliberations, it becomes a quorum of the other legislative body without a noticed meeting.
Right, but for example, say 1 or 2 people were watching a Community Health and Senior Services meeting, and there's no council members there. There's 2 that are in the attendees and want to raise their hand and speak. And there's only 2 council members on that meeting. Or in that meeting. We will no longer be at Zoom. So it'll be a physical space. You're in the room. A council member shows up to watch the meeting. What I've done in the past as a council member when I'm the only one at a meeting is I've raised my hand and spoken.
That's fine. It only becomes an issue if there's a quorum of any particular legislative body without the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. All right, so where are we going with this, people? Vice Mayor Badami.
It looks like we're probably needing a motion on E.
Yes, Ronnie.
I can try one. I don't know if I'll get support on it, but I move to recognize the recent accomplishments of the Community Health and Senior Services Commission, discuss the capacity of the commission, which we've done, and identify specific year 1 priorities from the roadmap for the CHSSC 2023 work plan, and I'm going to say all of the priorities. So I'll see if I get a second on that.
I think the priorities, that's item F, so we're not going to get there yet.
And if I may, would it be helpful to the maker of the motion to maybe refer to the game plan and attachment 6?
Let me go to
as the work that CHSSC would be completing?
Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you, Ms. Pravetti. So per the attachment 6, as far as the year 1 priorities.
Councilmember Hudes.
I would second the motion, but I would request that 2 things be added to it. One, that we try to find a way to have subcommittees that have actual members, because I think that's very important. And the second is to have 1 council liaison as well. And my rationale is that I think asking the CHSSC to do all of that without taking those steps is really not fair. They need more people, and they need, I think, to have more engagement from the council along the way, because there are going to be some trade-offs almost on a daily basis.
Councilmember Moore.
One quick clarification for the maker of the motion potentially, or just maybe in the game plan in general. Does this include the liaison to the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission? Because I don't, does it?
No, it does not.
Okay, great.
Okay, so then if it's not part of it, then I think we may need to have more of a discussion about what council agrees with the game plan. Because at this point, the game plan calls for an appointment of a liaison from CHSSC to the Transportation Commission, and a liaison from CHSSC to, I'm not sure which housing committee it would go to, but I think there's embedded in the game plan is this notion of liaisons. So if that's not the interest of the council, you may need to discuss that a little bit more.
Okay, Councilmember Rennie and then Councilmember Hudes.
I'm not sure if this is completely workable, but I mean, my thought is to leave the game plan as is, with the, I would suggest the direction that let the commission monitor how well they are addressing this. If they're feeling spread too thin, then the input from the council is to let the liaison to the transportation and liaison to the housing go, right? Leave this up to them to figure out whether they're being overwhelmed, whether they're feeling like, as Bilbo Baggins says, too much butter spread over bread kind of thing, and pull back. But they wanted to try to tackle this, so I would tend to say let them try, but give them the leeway of eliminating these if it looks like it's not working.
Okay, yeah, I was kind of thinking along the vein that in the plan it seemed to call out items like this, which seemed unnecessary to me if we break things up to go to commissions, but I'm totally fine with this commission deciding that either it's not productive or it's too much work or it's already getting done and there's no point in that. And so, yeah, leave it in, and if it doesn't make sense, then you can take a break from liaising.
So the maker of the motion will modify the motion to include that, leave it as is. But with the consideration that we find a way to have subcommittees with one council liaison.
Thank you. A comment on it is that I think that would be effective, and I think that we are going to be looking for the judgment of the CHSSC as they get into this. There's a lot of material to absorb, by the way. There are still work plans that have been developed in each of the goal areas that probably the CHSSC needs to pull into their master plans, and all of that come back to the council. I would suggest maybe in 4 to 6 months time, and see how we're doing with recruiting more people. But I think it would be a mistake to constrain the commission because they are the commission that we want to implement, and then say we can't do things because we have found no way to give them the bandwidth. So I'm very enthusiastic about recruiting for subcommittees and the commission coming back to the council in the future.
So we have a motion on the table. I'm not sure if we have a second.
Do we have?
I did second
Okay,
with
thank you.
the modifications.
Thank you.
Okay, and those are acceptable to the maker of the motion?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Councilmember Moore?
Yeah, and just one quick question. So I kind of heard this like maybe it's a non-binding liaison, like the liaison can liaise if they so choose, but I don't know. Is that or is it a liaison? I just don't want this to become burdensome, as we've kind of alluded to, if this is determined that it's not actually helpful.
And can we have the commission report back to us, or?
So the motion as we hear it is essentially the language on the agenda. We're recognizing the accomplishments. Council has discussed the capacity of the committee. Council is endorsing attachment 6 as the work plan for the game plan, essentially, with leeway to make changes as needed, is what I heard, plus the addition of a council liaison to CHSSC, and pending research, the creation of subcommittees to assist with implementation.
That captured it.
I have a question about subcommittees. So if this commission creates subcommittees, are those Brown Act groups, and what burden does that put on staff, and what requirements does it make for publicizing meetings?
So the general rule is if a legislative body by formal action creates a committee, and that committee meets regularly, it's subject to the Brown Act. And so that requires preparation of an agenda and posting of the agenda.
And what about ad hocs? Like, I've been on commissions where we have an ad hoc committee that works maybe for a couple months on a specific priority.
You and then me? Okay.
I was just going to suggest that I don't think we have all the answers on this tonight. I think we have the intention to create effective subcommittees, and I would be very interested in the town attorney working and coming back to the council with a specific structure that would work to achieve it, and just leaving it in the motion now to have subcommittees, and figure out the structure maybe at our next meeting.
Did you have anything to add?
I mean, the only thing I was going to add is the ad hoc committees that I'm thinking of were composed solely of less than a quorum of the superior legislative body. And I think what's complicating this is I think there's an interest in having non-residents. And the only reason that's an issue is because the superior legislative body is composed solely of residents. So that's why it's just taking a little bit longer.
Okay, we may have to not finalize this tonight and get more information. One concern I have is that if we take a commission that is comprised of 7 members, and the next thing you know, we've got 5 subcommittees, and staff has to monitor them, and we have to put out agendas, and we have Brown Act issues, then we no longer have 1 commission, we have 5. So I just want to make sure that the definition, I don't think we need to tell the commission how to do ad hocs or how to do the work. And I think that if we leave it that outside non-residents can participate, and we find a way within the Brown Act and within our, just using them as a resource, that makes things a lot less complicated. And if it looks like that is not available to get the work done, I would rather then have the commission come back to us and say, we need something more. I'm just afraid of creating something that's going to get so large that it's hard to move forward, or becomes a giant requirement for our staff members to have to facilitate each and every one of these meetings, and then finding the meeting space and the time. I don't know. I'm just hesitant to support something that I don't understand what it can become. Councilmember Moore.
I'm sympathetic to all of that. I think in the interest of moving this forward and allowing Director Baker to give the CHSSC the go-ahead to kind of get to work, I would be interested in maybe modifying, again, the Vice Mayor's motion to just change the word subcommittee to ad hoc. That just gives a little bit more flexibility, and then coming back. But I'm seeing the shaking of heads.
Councilmember Hudes.
I think we ran into this when we set up the original Senior Services Committee. My original motion was for ad hoc. I was then advised that standing was the proper term to accomplish. I would prefer not to try to figure it out right now. I think we understand the intention, and for this to be come back to us with a specific way that this will be put into place, whether it's through a resolution or whatever it is. But I do think it's a little more complicated.
Well then, okay, Councilmember Moore, because I'd like to see this cleaned up a little bit so that they can just move forward with their plan.
Yeah, exactly my thoughts. Yeah, I think I just want to make sure that we can allow the committee to get to work in whatever capacity, like, through ad hocs or whatever. So yeah, however we want to make that motion.
Councilmember Rennie.
I'm not sure what you all are hung up on, right? We've set it was a pretty clear motion where they can get started working. We're going to look and see if how we can enable bringing more people into work. We're going to put a council liaison on it. We do have a motion sitting on the table here. Just because the mayor doesn't like it doesn't mean you talk us to death. You got to take a vote at some point.
Okay. Then, okay, Vice Mayor Badami.
I wasn't going to add anything further, but I'm hoping for a vote to move this forward.
Right, I was going to call the question. Councilmember Moore.
And before we vote, can we clarify what we're voting on? Can we just have to make the manager read it one more time?
Oh, yeah, no problem. So the motion, and Vice Mayor, please correct me. So we want to, of course, recognize the recent accomplishments of the Community Health and Senior Services Commission. Council has discussed the capacity of that particular commission, identify specific year one priorities as laid out in attachment 6, which is known as the game plan, with leeway to make changes and adjustments. The additional piece is to appoint one council member as liaison to Community Health and Senior Services, and then to continue to explore the role of subcommittees in doing this work.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed. The motion passes 5-0. And it's not that the mayor didn't like it. The mayor was a little bit confused about. Okay, and then we have...
So as a follow-up, if I may, Mayor.
Yes, please.
Do you want the council to consider appointing its liaison at a future date? Or do you want us to bring the enabling resolution back to council at our next meeting to have the appointment happen at that point?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Then we'll have the enabling resolution. Okay. And now, because I'm iPad challenged at the moment, we have the next item. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Hudes.
I believe the next item was to see whether there were other items to attach, and so I wanted to come back to the idea of the community garden specifically. It's something that has already been partially funded through our capital program from last year. We will take another look at it. I can't think of a more tangible project that brings together the generations and moves forward diversity, equity, and inclusion, and benefits seniors to a great degree. And so I would like to see the involvement of the CHSSC and our movement forward in coordinating with the Parks Commission in moving this forward with all of the aspects that have come into discussion through the seniors I know that it's probably going to happen anyway, but I think there's some very rich ideas that came about in our Senior Services Committee and in other discussions. So I would like to consider adding that item as well.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I want to call out resident Kevin Arroyo, who first came forward with the concept of the community gardens on Pinehurst and really did so much legwork and brought it to Complete Streets and to the Parks Commission, where, you know, he's so excited that this is moving forward. And in fact, it is for young families. It'll mostly be for the local residents there, and he views it as a template. We also have community gardens that I've seen going in the North 40 in the phase 1. And I know there's community gardens at the high school. So I think moving all this forward is exciting. And, you know, maybe in the future our Parks Commission will find places in parks to put community gardens. I don't know, but I think it is, you know, really great to have this spread around town. So adding that as an item would be monitoring what the town is progressing with, or I'm trying to figure out what Councilmember Hude's.
I would say that it would be, the action item would be to move forward with, I believe it is S5, and for the Community Health and Senior Services, maybe through subcommittee, to coordinate with the Parks Commission to move forward the community garden. I know it won't be done in year 1, but there's another milestone there.
Okay, thank you.
I could make that into a motion if you like.
Okay, and I do have a question. Is this residing under the Parks Commission, or is this in Parks and Public Works right now?
It's in Parks and Public Works, but the Parks Commission, if we do need additional community engagement, the Parks Commission is the place. But it's wonderful to have the support for this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would you like to make a motion, Councilmember Hudes?
So I move to include the community garden in the year 1 to the extent that there would be coordination between the roadmap and the Parks Commission to help move that forward.
I'll second that. I will also make a boost for the fact that Kevin Arroyo is looking to put together a governing board to oversee that and coordinate the volunteers. So as people are, as the Community Health and Senior Service Commission looks at that, giving him assistance, finding people to run this community garden will be helpful once it's implemented. So we have a motion and a second. Any other comments? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed. Motion passes 5-0. And now we are finally at thanking the Senior Services Committee members for their service to the town. Encourage the members to stay encouraged. I know that's going to happen. With the roadmap implementation as active community members with Community Health and Senior Service Commission, and sunset the Senior Service Committee. So we can open that to discussion, but it looks like because we've taken the action items from this incredibly amazing professional level plan, and we've got a very able commission. I'll turn it over to Director Baker, but it looks like we're at a really good point right now.
Yes, when the Senior Services Committee was formed, it's a specific task that it was to come forward with that roadmap to put that together. That task has now been completed, and being that it has now served its purpose as a committee, and you have pretty much allocated all these steps out in the year 1 action items to various commissions and to the CHSSC, then it would avoid duplications of effort and communication and whatnot, to be able to go ahead and sunset the SSC and let the CHSSC move on and take over as you have directed them in previous motions this evening.
Thank you. Do we have any comments, questions? Vice Mayor.
Yeah, so on this item, we are thanking the Senior Services Committee. So again, I want to thank you all because this was just a magnificent piece of work. So thank you for that. And that also goes to 3 of the council members, Mayor Risto, Councilmember Rennie, and Councilmember Hudis, who are also involved on the Senior Services Committee. So again, thank you for all your hard work. That proclamation is in order. Thank you. And to the CHSSC as well. I already thanked you. And that includes you, Chair Conrad, for your attachment with all the list of accomplishments. Thank you.
And personally, I want to thank Councilmember Hudis because Councilmember Rennie and I each served on that committee, and I was on some subcommittees, but Councilmember Hudis has been there from the beginning through the completion, and I know he had a huge part in helping write that amazing plan. And so, thank you. That was exemplary. So I don't know if we need a motion on this. We do, because we need to sunset this committee, and it looks like we have people ready, willing, and able to take this beautiful plan and make it a reality. So, Councilmember Hudis.
Yeah, it's my honor to thank the Senior Services Committee, and it's been my honor to work on it. And I really believe that this is going to be transformational for the town, and not just for our older adults, but for all the residents of the town. And so I would move to thank and to encourage to stay engaged, and to sunset the Senior Services Committee as we found a way to move this forward.
Councilmember Moore.
Second the motion.
Okay, any comments? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed. The motion passes 5-0. And that was our last item. And we had no consent items pulled, so nothing's coming done. And meeting's adjourned.